Dr. Julie Fratantoni, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So you're a pretty smart cat.
I actually want to dig into that.
Okay.
In a minute.
So you are a neuroscientist, PhD neuroscience scientist for the University of Texas, Dallas. You've done that for 10 plus years or something?
I've been, a student for a long time, but in my current role at the center for the last 2.5.
Okay. So, do you enjoy school?
Love school. I just love learning, like just curious. And I think that's really all it is to like school, right? Well, and there's also, there's kind of like this set thing that I think it's kind of unfortunate when you get into, quote, the real world and how like jobs actually work, because school doesn't really prepare you for that. Like just in terms of thinking that, if I just do this set of criteria, then I pass, or, it's over at the end of the semester and then there's the next thing. And it's like really a career is like this slow build, and it's not up and to the right, and it's like loop-de-loops backwards. And
well, especially you, because you do research, right? So you really do have breakthroughs where like, oh, everything I thought was wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a good scientist, yes. Because
like, I'm not, but if you are a good one.
I'm trying to be a good one. I think, a lot of, if you look at like just, I don't know, a lot of history of different scientists, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but there are so many times where we just kind of, our intuitive assumptions about the way the world works are not always right. And so we don't always ask the right questions when we're doing studies. And we set up studies to kind of just prove what we already think makes sense. So it's harder sometimes to make discoveries that way. And so I don't think anyone intentionally does that, because it's really hard to overcome that bias that we all just naturally have.
Yeah, when you're surrounded by other smart people.
Okay, so yeah, this descriptor SMART, which I said I want to dig into, I think that's something that actually at the Center for Brain Health, we want to redefine that term. I think that it's associated with high GPA, high SAT scores, where you went, if you went to graduate school, if you have a PhD, if you're a doctor, things like that. And really that's not a good measure of smart. So I challenge that, or we want to get people to challenge that, because I think to really be smart, you
need to know how to hijack a car.
Good
point. I agree.
You need to be able to like get out of situations or problem solve. Maybe not doing things illegally, but you have to navigate relationships. Like social relationships are one of the most complex things we do. And to do that well is hard. You have to be smart in a sense for that. So I think there's a lot of different definitions of smart. And if you look at, people will tell you in med school, in law school, who makes the best lawyers and the best doctors. It's not the ones that come in with applications that had the highest GPAs. It's people that also have, emotional intelligence and can do all these other things. So I think, it's actually a pet peeve of mine when people are like, oh, you're a neuroscientist, you must be really smart. And I'm like, well, one, you're making big assumptions, because really, and maybe I just had a fortunate path, but I think to me, a PhD is that you're curious and you're willing to persevere, because you have a lot of failures. And so that could be really any profession. So yeah, I think I always want to encourage people and throw it back to them of like, well, I think you're really smart. And I think
I think there's people who are book smart and people who are like street smart. That's how I always label it. So like my wife is very book smart. Me, I'm very good if you throw me in the streets. Like I feel very confident. Like if I was to lose everything tomorrow, I would have it all within like 2 years. I feel very confident in that. But I'm a guy with a 15 on his ACT, like just nothing.
I don't even remember what the ACT scale is.
It's like 36, I think, is the top.
But see, that's what you're using as your marker of whether you're smart or not. And that has no bearing in like the real world.
Exactly. And it's also like, it's this weird judgment where people's ability to study for a test determine what school they went to.
Sure.
There's like, when you look at buying a home, if you were to say, okay, your credit shows that you buy things and pay them off, and your income shows you make a lot of money, and your bank statements show you save a lot of it, that is like, you should be a homeowner. This makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. But in school, we don't do hey, we, threw you out in the woods and made you like find your way home. Like we don't do any like real world, like, hey, we told you had to run a marathon with no training and just saw when you gave up, saw where your breaking points were, saw how you talked to yourself, so on and so forth. So I think it's like, oh, you studied, like I had friends that did very good on the ACT, and that's all. They like hired tutors for it. They made it their life.
You learn how to take the test.
Yeah. I literally showed up, never once studied for it, walked in the room and was like, oh, this is what this is, and then filled it out, did bad. I was like, okay.
But I think what's sad about kind of just society or the way that we think about smart is based on just the things that we, a test you took in high school, right? That then it has kind of that just mental framework stays with you the rest of your life. I can't tell you how many people I've met and talked to that is, it like stopped there. Like it was like, that's where I cap out, or like, this is like, I'm just street smart. And it's like, well, no, actually, street smart is encapsulating all of these different skills that you need to be, quote, book smart. Like they're not separate. Con
artists are incredibly good at building trust.
Oh yeah.
There's all kinds of smart, and the real crazy ones, the people that do like the craziest things, are the people that are like hyper aware and book smart, are both. You remember the guy that founded Silk Road?
Oh, it sounds familiar, but
do you know what Silk Road is?
No.
Okay, Silk Road was this online place where you could buy drugs.
Okay.
And you pay with cryptocurrency. This is like 2012. And this guy was like brilliant. And the FBI could not find him because he did everything through a Tor network, which is like a very secure way of doing things. And they'd be able to like hack into the site, but they couldn't find who, they could never find who was doing it. And how he's caught is very interesting. But essentially, you go back to his like upbringing, and he is, he's like some type of scientist, and like he's just very, very smart in all things, including like how to talk to people and like how to take things like from idea to live. And like there's like some of the most, like I would be pressed to say that some of the most successful entrepreneurs are probably complete psychopaths, because it requires a lot of hats.
I mean, yeah.
And then you have like Zuckerberg, who's just a robot.
Well, it's like, I don't know if you've read Steve Jobs' biography, but it's like the reality distortion field. Like there's this element of like, reality doesn't apply to me.
And I find myself in that. I'm like, so I bought an army truck. It's enormous. And
why?
Well, the reason why is actually kind of logical. I didn't know how big it was. I bought it like online, a lot of things. But when I went to go pick it up, I was like, this is the craziest thing ever. And like the first thing I did was just park in an illegal parking spot because it weighs 16,000 pounds. I'm like, not going to tow it.
Oh my gosh.
What are you going to do about it? And it's like, immediately my friend was like, hey, that's kind of like Steve Jobs. So he wouldn't drive around with, he wouldn't put tabs on his car. And he would just like take the ticket because he didn't like license plates on cars. Do you remember that in the book?
No. Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, oh, I don't want to be that guy. So it's like, we see those things.
Yeah. But I think going back to, people needing a mix of skills, or that some of the smartest people maybe aren't in the highest esteemed jobs or careers. I think also another myth that I like to debunk is this left brain, right brain situation where people think that, you're either creative or you're analytical, and there's no science to support that at all. That's like everyone's favorite false favorite brain myth that they love to attach to and identify with. And you need both. You need your whole brain working together. And so to your point of like being both creative, but also able to kind of do some of the more analytical thinking is really important. And I think that we tend to maybe be stronger in one side, or we get accolades or praise for that, and then we just lean on it because like, oh, that's what I'm good at, so we keep doing that, so then it gets stronger, so then you do become better at that than the other side. So we're kind of unbalanced, but really seeking, I think, both is what's so essential. Like if you look at Nobel Prize winners, like most Nobel Prize winners in the sciences like physics, and they are also amazing artists, because they have to in a sense, new discovery is creativity. You're putting together information in new ways. So to be able to kind of, and especially for things like physics where things are tiny and you're having to and I know nothing about physics also, just disclaimer, but, you're thinking about like atoms and molecules and things that are small, that there's a sense of imagination, and then in thinking about how those things fit together and being able to just sort of create or imagine different possibilities. Anyway, I just thought I read a book about that at one point, and I was like, this is so important. And people either think that you're just a science person or just an arts person, or when we go to school.
Well, we love to put people in boxes. That is something we really love to do. Do you think a lot of people tie their self-worth to their grades and their titles and stuff?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Dr. Chapman, my boss, was just telling, this is a story that she tells a lot, but it was someone she met or a client she worked with, and he had like an aneurysm or something, or hemorrhage or something, or some kind of brain issue. And when he recovered, he had surgery. When he recovered, it was when he was young. And the doctor told him, you'll only ever be good enough to be at like a level of a car parker. Like that's what that's the function you can expect. And so he just always was like, okay, that's what I'm at, like took that label. And so he did some of our training and, or one of our assessments, and she told him, she's like, you're really smart. And he goes, no, I'm not, like, there's no way. And he went on, she's like, yeah, you can. And he goes on and goes to like an incredible college. He just never even tried because he was like, oh, I can't. And then, so to your point, I think people, went on to college, I think went on to get a graduate degree, is like successful. And so I think, it's unfortunate how people, I think there's some element, some of these fun like personality things where you're like, oh, I want to belong, or I want to feel known or identify with something. But then on the flip side, I think there's some dangerous terms, I don't know, in terms of even telling someone like, oh, you're ADD, or like, which is a real thing. But I think it's like that, it almost is saying like, you're going to have these limitations or these extra difficulties or whatever, when really it's just like, yeah, hey, that's how your brain's wired.
You're so positive. I'm like, oh, you found an excuse to tell me. That's all I think about. Oh, another excuse.
Yeah. But I think people get those labels, or I don't know, they either hide behind them or they allow them to kind of stunt their, I don't know what
I see all the time. People are like, oh, well, because I'm an Enneagram 7. I'm like, you can't use this excuse. This is the real world. Okay.
Yeah, helpful self-growth tools, not so helpful to just, I don't think it's, it can't start and end there. There's no limits, I think, to the brain. And that's something I think that people don't hear that message enough, because the message that at least my parents kind of got and passed on to our generation, I think, was that it's kind of like you're born with what you've got. And so it's like, if you do drugs or hit your head or do something, like, you're just losing brain cells, and like, you're basically just hope that you have some left, by the time you're that age. And it's like, it's not true. You actually, you have new growth and connections all the time. That's neuroplasticity. So that's I think a game changer in terms of people understanding the amount of control you have over your own brain and your potential.
I was talking to like a successful client, and he said something like, yeah, I just don't even want to like fill my brain with that. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He was like, like, I just want to, like, if I get really good at that, I won't be really good at this anymore. And I was like, okay, which, I'm thinking, I'm like, no way is this guy dumb enough to think that your brain's a hard drive. But he says something that makes me think. So I like continue to press on. I'm like, you do realize, that like, you can put unlimited amounts of information in your brain. Like, you can continue to learn things. It's not like a hard drive to where you max out space. And he's like, that's not true. And this is like a 50-year-old multimillionaire.
Wow.
And I was like, what?
What?
But think about this. One time I heard everybody's favorite person, Donald Trump, talking about working out. And he was like, yeah, I don't work out because I don't want to have energy. And I was like, this guy is a billionaire, 70-something years old, and he thinks that energy works like a battery. Like, he thinks that he wakes up with a full battery and everything he does decreases it.
he thinks exercise decreases your energy.
Yeah, my dad thinks, a lot of people think this. A lot of people think like this is a battery, and like if I exert stuff, then because like from a 9-year-old's perspective, it made sense.
Sure.
It is a weird thing to be tired and work out and then have more energy. That is kind of a mind. I can see that. Even struggle with that. Like, oh, I'm gonna feel better when I work out. Like my brain is gonna like me more. Tell me about the people you've studied that have been crazy high performers and kind of what you learn about their brain.
So we've done different cognitive training. It's called SMART training. It's an acronym for
your favorite.
My favorite word. We're redoing it's strategic memory advanced reasoning training. That's what it stands for. We work with, these high performers, these corporate executives and people that have been really successful. And I think it's interesting because I think no matter how successful you are, you actually always have room to grow. So I'm not really answering your question in terms of like, what is it about them that makes them as great as they are? I think what's more interesting is that as great as they are, they can still yet become better, and that there's ways to do that. I think nowadays, technology is a huge one. Stress is a big one, like kind of balancing that information. But I would say something that a lot of them are really good at is being able to synthesize a lot of information. So, because it's info overload. We have access to so much. It's like more in an hour or in a day than like in a lifetime for someone who lived in like the 50s or something like that, just because.
Yeah.
And
Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, they're really good at being able to kind of cut to the chase or zoom out to those bigger ideas. And really typically good at blocking and saying no to a lot of things. And I think those are underrated skills in terms of, I think people feel like more is better always, or more of a good thing is always better. And it's really being a little bit picky and strategic in terms of which things you're going to press forward on and which things you're going to, pause.
And when you look at athletes, what are you finding?
So athletes, the work with athletes is more, it's the same. A lot of them, I think what's interesting with athletes is that they have kind of this period, especially like professional ones, that then when they, retire in their like 30s or 40s, it's like
27.
Yeah, they have like a whole new career that they launch for themselves. And so I think what's most impressive there is that, and also they struggle, and we see this with the military too, when they're transitioning, is that kind of pivot point where the ones that are successful are the ones that are able to really see how I'm going to apply those skills that I learned in a different setting. Because I think a lot of vets come out and they're like, I'm not, they were super high performing when they were actually active duty. And then as a civilian, they're like, oh, my skills aren't valued in this way. So being able to reframe those is huge, and similar for athletes. There's a ton of, leadership and discipline and even being strategic and all of that then can be really useful. But I think it's noting those and then knowing how to be successful with it. So I think, the other thing we see with athletes is that's important is a lot of them in military also have brain injury or concussion or just blast exposure and all kinds of stuff. So really learning healthy strategies to kind of really take care of their brain. It's like the last thing, like they get special things for all kinds of physical training and nutrition and, all of that, but they don't get anything specifically for their brain. So it's like getting to hone in on that and really helping them put some strategies in place to combat things like, prolonged effects of concussion, difficulty focusing. Like there's things that can help.
And what are those things?
So a lot of it has to do with kind of, like I said, blocking, being strategic. I think typically with brain injury, it is much harder to focus. So really learning ways to prioritize your day. So one of the things we talk about is we talk about elephants and rabbits is how we kind of categorize our to-do list. And so I always ask people like, okay, think about your to-do list. And it's like, how many things are on it? Do you ever get everything done every day? Great, me neither. And then really, instead of just looking at this list and trying to get everything done, instead really prioritizing it based on cognitive effort. So not just kind of avoiding the temptation of just checking off the easy things, and instead really seeing what's going to require that deeper level thinking and what doesn't, and then slotting time to prioritize those first. And you get to pick two. So it's like, what are my top 2 elephants for the day? Everything else is a rabbit. And this is from our T. Boone Pickens gave us this quote: when you're hunting elephants, don't get distracted chasing rabbits. So it's like, kind of being able to just stay focused, but doing that in a proactive, strategic way to start your day rather than like allowing the overwhelm.
His ranch went for sale. Did you see that?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, 250 cents, $1 million.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. He was a huge supporter of the center, actually. I didn't get to really know him personally, but man, what a legacy.
I guess. It seems like he threw it away by going all in on wind, right? I mean, like anybody does any research, like, all right, anybody does any research, and then I blank. Nuclear. Like nuclear is like clearly the cleanest option, the least impact on everything. It's like safe. It's the most powerful. And so to go all in on wind, I always thought was weird. That's how I found out who he was. I remember seeing all these commercials. He's like, I'm T. Boone Pickens. I'm an oil billionaire, and I'm going all in on wind. I was like, that's kind of a bad decision.
Oh, man.
He probably pays your payroll, right? So I can't say anything. You can't say anything. I get it. See, like I ultimately think universities are bad and evil. Like that's ultimately what I think.
Why?
And it's because it's this weird thing where they've raised their prices every year for 30 years straight. And then the government, no matter what, will back the loan of anybody that wants to go there. And so you can charge anything you want because everyone will give you a loan, no problem. And then they have these like $1 billion endowment funds, but yet they're not they somehow get government money even though they have their own money. And the government gives loans for the students to go there. And it's just kind of like this machine that breeds more students. Like it's like I like the way Peter Thiel looks at it, which is like it's $1.6 trillion worth of debt that breeds like more people, because it's like to go against that. Like once you've already spent the $100K and done all the things, to like turn away from that is like really tough. Yeah. And so I meet so many great professors that work at universities, and I'm like. What is your perspective on that? Because it's like, I think you're great. I think like everybody who works here is great. I just think the whole like system itself just feels broken and feels like it's preying. Like for example, I think payday loan places are like evil when you're charging like 30% interest on like poor people. Like that is bad. Yeah. And so the same thing when you take a kid who's like 18 years old and you know he's not going to do well in that setting, and you're like, you have to go to college. Like a good example is like most high schools, they're preparing kids for college. Why aren't they preparing them to go either straight into the workforce or go into like manual labor jobs that we have enormous openings in, which is like plumbing, HVAC, so on and so forth. Jobs that there's unlimited amounts of scholarships out there. Like Caterpillar averages like 60 diesel mechanics. That they're hiring 60 diesel mechanics at every location. Wow. 60. And so you see all this, and it's like all high schools are pushing is like, we're going to go to college. And then it's this weird thing where it's like, oh, we care about things. Like, colleges are the most woke, right? So they're always like, look, we have our pronouns in our email because we care. And it's like all these, like, we care. But then they make $100 million a year off their football team and don't pay their players. It's like, that doesn't really seem like you care. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I do think that the system and student loans in particular is a huge problem. I don't think it's fair to, like, my kids, if I have kids one day,
you have kids?
No, yeah, I don't have kids. But like, if I get to have kids, they like, if we can't afford college, then it's like, go to trade school or go work. Like, it's like, I would rather them that than take on that amount of debt because it's crippling. And then the rest of your life, you're just in a hole. So yeah, I do think there are some big things, you know, huge system wide that need to change. I think also what's interesting to think about the changing of the landscape, right? Like when universities were founded, it was like that was the source of knowledge because there wasn't the internet. So it's like it's so different now that it's things are evolving, but it's always slower than we need it to be. And I think Bruce Mao is a designer that we are collaborating with, and I love the way that he thinks about just the future and about even education a little bit, but that like it's design problems. Like it's like the way education or higher level education is designed is like not, is it producing the best, is that the best way to prepare people for work or to solve real world problems, or even looking at high schoolers or elementary education. And I do think that some big shifts need to happen in terms of even including education, like around, you know, emotion regulation and things like, you know, things that you're just not taught, but now we know and would be good for kids to have in school. But when you're tied to, you know, standardized testing, state testing, the teachers don't have, it's like, anyway, so I feel for people that are, it's like, yeah, I think.
Does it ever get fixed, or does it have to break completely to be fixed?
That's a great question. I feel like people are, I don't know. I feel like the general, I guess I don't really have a lot of data to back this up, but like my general feeling, I'll just say that, is that, I mean, people are becoming more and more aware, or like they're wanting a shift. It's just like those institutions are so slow and hard to move because like there's just so much tied up in that. So it's never for lack of want of change, I think, which is like most problems in the world.
Yeah, it's odd. I mean, it's funny how colleges are educational institutes, right? That's why they exist, but they don't market themselves that way. Like University of Alabama has their own barber shop in their locker room for their players.
Really?
Yeah, and it's like they build. You know, if you build a $250 million football stadium, like, is that about education at this point? Like, if we know that, like, playing football can injure your brain, and we know that they're playing, like, this is weird thing where it's like, I don't know, I'm just really struggling with this idea that, like, it's kind of like the whole, like, BLM movement, you know? It's like banks, like Chase, all those people are down to, like, hang BLM flags. As long as it means, like, okay, cool, we hang this BLM flag, you don't burn down our building, we don't have to change anything, we don't have to do anything, we just put out a press release that we care about black people, whatever. And like universities do the same thing. And it's like nobody's out there like, hey, you know, you made $100 million off your football team last year, which was 96% black, and you didn't pay them anything but scholarships. And then I love well, you know, some will go pro and make millions. Yeah, 1% of 1%. Like, what does that even mean? Like that's like saying like, oh, well, if you work my plantation for a long time, eventually you can, you know, go start your own plantation. Like, I mean, yeah, like, it's just a weird, like, thing that these, like, universities are somehow woke, but then, like, really rooted in, like, the 1700s.
Yeah, man. Well, UTD doesn't have a football team, so I feel like we're out on some of those conversations. We have an awesome chess team, though.
Are you part of it?
It's funny. No.
What's your favorite game?
Ooh. Okay, it's a game that I like love and hate at the same time. It's a board game. Actually, there's a few. Okay, have you ever played Monopoly Deal?
I love Monopoly. Tell me
okay,
about
so
Monopoly
it's
Deal.
the card game version of Monopoly, basically. So it goes a lot faster, but it's like just intense and a lot more fun. So it could be, you know how Monopoly just can take forever.
That's my favorite. Because what I do is I get like the right properties and I just drain everybody slowly. And I'm like, I'll stay here all night.
Yeah, Monopoly Deal is really fun. The one I was going to say that has caused some conflict among friends is it's called Blockus. It's like, it's an actual board and the pieces kind of look like Tetris, but it's a 4-player game. And anyway, you try to block each other, but it's like there's some strategy involved, and it's a good amount of strategy. That one's fun. played a lot of games.
So you have a very wild
over during the pandemic.
Yeah, it was such a great time to travel during the pandemic, but then everything was like shut down, so that kind of made it like not as fun.
Yeah. Did you travel a lot?
I tried to, but the problem is like when I travel, I don't want to like make my own food. I want to like try the local restaurants. Like it's not like it's like, oh, I want to see what like local food. It's like, oh, it's all shut down or like to go only. And it was like early in the pandemic where people didn't really know how to do to go well. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, this sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. There was like a sweet spot, I think, like early last year or at the beginning of this year, I guess. I'm already in 2022 in my head. But yeah, that there was like things were just enough open that like it was fun to travel and have like the whole road to yourself on the airplane, and a few restaurants are open.
Yeah, exactly. There is. Yeah, you're exactly right. There was this weird time. It's like right after the stimulus where all the airlines got all their money, so they had to stay open. Mm-hmm. And people were still scared, kind of, or people were just trying to get people out, so they're offering great deals. Did you go anywhere?
Yep. I went to Hawaii in January last year. So it was a great time to go because there was just like no crowds.
I heard Hawaii's super scared of COVID.
Yeah. I was in Oahu. And so it's like the most like city or like the hospitals there. So like they were, more open or like things were open, but definitely, I mean, a lot of stuff, they definitely got hit hard in terms of a lot of things closing and just like everywhere else. But yeah, it was awesome because it was like the beaches were not crowded, the lines to go, like, I don't know, hiking or to see different things. So I loved that.
So you've been studying like brains after COVID, like COVID effects, right?
Yeah. So we're really interested in partnering up with a couple different medical institutions to see what are some of the effects of what people are calling now long COVID, or, you know, kind of these lingering effects. And people are looking a lot at the physiological symptoms, but not as much at, you know, brain fog is one of the most persistent complaints people have, or just kind of this like, inability to even return to work as normal, like those types of things. So we haven't started it yet, but we've like kind of drafted our...
Yeah, I mean, I know people that it's now been over a year and they still can't smell anything.
Yeah, that's so...
That was like before anything. I was like, look, I know absolutely nothing. I just feel like because it's so strange, it had to come from a lab. Right? Like I was like, I just don't believe it came from like a wet market in China. Like that's just so crazy to me that like that was the leading theory at one point, that it came from a bat from a wet market. It's like, really? We're going to pretend that this is real.
I honestly, all I can say is we're living in a really weird time. Like I don't have really like theories of my own other than to say like, what can we do but just live our lives?
Yeah. Did you get frustrated that it was like an airborne disease, but everybody was like putting hand sanitizer everywhere? That's one of my biggest frustrations.
Yeah, I mean...
What a stupid concept. You're like, hey, we've sanitized everything. It's like, it's an airborne disease.
Not helpful, yeah. I think that's... I mean, just like logical inconsistency is hard. Situations like of like, what do we know about it and what... Yeah, exactly, to your point. It's... I think it's been fascinating to see just like the different responses for different reasons, and kind of like how to navigate, you know, respecting other people's opinions or like fear or whatever it is. Yeah. 'Cause, I don't know.
Do you think we should respect other people's fear and opinions?
I think respect, yes. Always like, it's kind of like, I don't know, I've done some research on empathy and compassion and kind of this ability to really, at least even if you don't agree with it, try to see other perspectives or multiple perspectives to a situation. So I think that's a healthy brain exercise for a lot of people to try, is like, I hate seeing how polarizing it's become. So it's just like, it's just, you know, it would be a good thing for people to, not necessarily, I'm not saying everyone needs to agree. We're all going to have our own views. But to be able to just even have conversations, it's like you have to be so on eggshells.
It's really, like we had a guest on. It was like 3 hours of just like awesomeness, and it was something he was really passionate about. And at the end, somehow Trump got mentioned, and he started like shouting into the mic about how much he hated Trump for like 30 minutes. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, am I? And he even would do this thing. I'll stop. I don't want to put him on blast because he's a nice guy. But I mean, it's just like that was like his thing, right? And it's like, look, like I don't like Biden. Okay, move on. Like I just like it's just a thing of like it's so crazy then how like upset people get about things in general.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Tristan Harris or Asa Raskin and the Center for Humane Technology? Mm-mm. They have an interesting podcast. The first few episodes I really liked. It was called the podcast is called Your Undivided Attention, but they talk a lot about technology's role in a lot of the polarization and kind of the outragification that we're seeing today, and just in the ways, in a lot of the algorithms of what gets amplified or what gets reshared or what gets...
Yeah, but do you think it's because people's lives suck or people's lives are too good? Like I often think, like when I sometimes see what people complain about, I'm like, oh, your life is way too good.
Yeah, well, I think it's like it's like giving everyone a mouthpiece that they didn't have before. And then two, but I think the part that's out of our control, that's more kind of in the ethics of the tech companies is how that information is then amplified. And that if you're like, it's the most polarizing messages that are going to get the most retweets or that, so it's like kind of like we're like fueling the fire that already exists. So it's like, we're not really helping.
Have you heard, what's his name? He's a comedian, Tim Dillon. Have you heard Tim Dillon talk about this?
No.
Do you know who he is?
No.
All right. So he's like this like overweight comedian. He just says a bunch of ridiculous things. Like when Joe Rogan got COVID, he released like a statement that like he like started the rumor that Joe Rogan had died of COVID. And Joe Rogan's one of his best friends. And so he made this like 5-minute video, like it killed him. And anyway, he's got this, he's on this one podcast and they're like, wow, your Twitter's really been taking off lately. You've grown a lot. He's like, yeah, it took me, I had to keep putting out crazy things, like XYZ politician had sex with his daughter, just gross, awful things. And he's like, but finally got it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it is so they do promote those things, but I guess, I don't know if this is like a emotional intelligence thing, but it's like, I see that for what it is. I'm like, oh, this is somebody trying to get clout or somebody trying to go viral or like, and I also don't participate in any conversation where I can't be heard. So like if you ever see on Facebook where it's like, what's your favorite color? It's like some random Facebook page and there's like 28,000 comments of people writing purple. Have you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't really use Facebook that much.
Yeah, and it's like
I believe it.
I'm like, why would somebody ever want to like? I'm not ever going to comment on something that isn't directly like helpful.
Yeah.
So it's it's this weird like I guess people are just really lonely and really bored and life's too good because that's the only reason I could think why you would do that. Like the only reason I'm not like picking fights with people on social media or whatever. I mean, occasionally I'm picking fights with people on social media because I let them mess around. There's this guy that like wrote a like post about how like awful I was, and he was Mormon, so I just started posting all these Mormon jokes, and he just like got madder and madder and madder, and I was like, I win. And then I like posted my strategy. I was like, all right, guys, here's how I took this person from not liking me to hating me. So like that's like a to me that's like an engineering problem that I solved. I was like, check this out. You add this ingredient, it just kind of
yeah.
But I don't understand. I mean, that's why I think when I see all this crazy things, I'm like, I guess these people just don't have real jobs or don't work hard enough or like.
Yeah. I think it's it's like.
Because like you're not involved in that because you're doing shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
It's just, but I think, I don't know. I think part of it is part of it is like, yeah, having the discipline or giving yourself the guardrails or the self-control to be like, I'm going to choose to engage in this or I'm not. But there's also, I think, an element, which is what kind of Center for Humane Technology was founded for, was to like take some element of ownership or responsibility in the way those tools are designed, because they're tapping into even like, so Asa Raskin is the one who invented the infinite scroll, and he's like, what have I done? Right. Cause it's like people just, anyway, but these little things are things that they've, taken nods from Vegas and slot machines of like the pull down to refresh, like things that give us this dopamine hit that are addicting in nature. And so I think, it's like, our attention has become monetized, like it's an attention economy. And the fact that like the more eyes are on screens, the more money they make. So it's like a really dangerous thing. And so when you think about brain health, mental health, ability to make decisions, ability to think about what you're posting or what you're going to engage in, it's kind of like, it almost feels a little bit unfair because there's just some innate even neuroanatomy, neurobiology, neuroscience that would show that, yeah, if you're given these things, that this is what you'll do and how it kind of affects human behavior. So I think that and I'm not anti-technology either. Like it's a fantastic tool that has allowed us to do way more now than we ever could. So I think it's just kind of like proceed with caution or have a game plan in place for what that looks like.
Yeah, and especially with children, I think is like the biggest thing. It's like it's so crazy to me when I'm at a restaurant and I see like a 3-year-old playing a game on an iPhone. And I'm like, oh, really? You couldn't be enough of a parent to tell your kid, like, hey, when we're at restaurants, we act this way. And of course, I don't have a 3-year-old yet, so maybe, but I'm never going to get my son an iPhone at that age. Like, he'll just going to, like, even if he just cries it out, like, he's not, like, there is a way that we, like there is rules to society. And it's like, I'm not going to teach my kids starting at age 3 that it's okay to be like playing video games on a phone while you're at dinner. Right.
Yeah. But it takes that. And so I think, I don't know, not everyone.
Not everyone's very smart.
Gets that. Not everyone has
Some
that.
people are dumb. Am I right?
No, I didn't say that. But I think
people aren't intentional.
That's it. I think people aren't intentional. I think it's like you don't ever intend to create bad habits. Like they just sort of start and then they keep going and then they're really hard to break.
Yeah. It's, I think people don't realize how addictive most things can be. Like there's kind of that idea that you can like just instantly become addicted to things. And I think that's probably very rare. I think that most of the time people just gradually become addicted to them, and then it becomes their life. And then depending on like how secure they are with themselves, they get like very combative if you like challenge anything to do with that.
For sure. It's like a slow drift and then it's a very slippery slope. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, I depend on this. But you can even be addicted to emotions and feeling states, right? Of like, the person that's always like the victim or that's always angry, like kind of that, just those neurotransmitters, those hormones, like that rush that you get, even if it's a state that you don't like it's one of, like I said, being upset, it kind of, and then you seek those situations out again to recreate that state.
Yeah. So entrepreneurs, we love being like, nobody believing us, like everything against us. And so you'll see a lot of times when entrepreneurs get successful is they then create their own chaos because they're not in chaos. Like things aren't chaotic anymore.
Do you have personal experience with that?
Not a ton. I don't consider myself successful, so maybe that's why. No, I mean, I've, like most entrepreneurs, my wife hates when I say this. Most entrepreneurs cheat on their wives. And it's simply because like life becomes too good and then they have too much free time and then they fill their free time. They just like, I call it the woke stage where they just kind of like, maybe I could have multiple partners or like, sometimes it's that, sometimes it's just like, well, I want it to just, now that I have money, I just want an easy life. And so they avoid anything hard. So like, that means like, oh, like I need to have a hard conversation with my wife about like things aren't working out. So this person likes me because I drive a nice car or whatever. So I'll just go over here. Right. And they go over these awful paths that then continue is the issue. Because most like, let's say first one's divorced, they get married second time, the exact same thing will happen again. Then they'll be on the third. And I can like point to like 15, 20 different people like that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And so it's very odd that we can be addicted to chaos, or we can be addicted to bad things. And that's, I guess, the most empowering thing is that when people are addicted but don't realize they're addicted, and you can help like lead them out of that, then you can change their life.
Do you think, I don't know, I guess, well, I was going to ask kind of like what you think the like influence of other people versus the person themselves realizing it, like at that point. Like if they're at a point where they don't realize it yet, like do they have to come to that point before they can start to change? Or
I think so. I think all, like, you might know this better than me, but it doesn't like all research point that people have to make their own decision to get clean and their own decision to change their life, and that like no matter who their parents are, no matter who's pushing them, it doesn't matter. I
don't know like specific studies on that, but I mean, sounds plausible. It's not my area of expertise, but yeah. I mean, from just like personal, like people anecdotally that I know, I think that sounds.
Yeah. And I think this is like I would say this is like a huge issue with like the Black community, because I think they were like completely like redlining all these things happen that were terrible. And now those don't exist anymore, but they still like, some of them still live in that mindset, like, oh, I won't be able to own a home. And it's like, well, this redlining hasn't existed since the 50s. Like this is, you know, like I didn't hear it in anything either, and I just bought a home. You know, it's like these things are very like it's about changing your mind. Like I would say we had who are the people we had on? African store. Yeah, we had this mother-daughter on, and it was like her business had 3X, but she was like, I'm still just a poor Black woman, you know, and like, you know, it's just like this mindset was just like, it's like, what, you made 3 times more money this year and you're still like, what were you last year then? Were you just like a homeless? Like, I don't know, like, like you made 3X the money. And so, but it was this, like everything was about like her mindset to everything was just awful. And I see that over and over again. And then I see a lot of people in your field that are like, hey, if you can change your mindset, you can change your life. People that aren't like actually PhDs, they just like, you know, they just study people like you and they're like, oh, I'd see this trend. So I do like the power of training your brain.
Yeah.
That's a really strange thing. Like what if we taught that in schools? Like what if from like age 5, we told kids like you can actually change your brain to be able to accomplish things?
I mean, that's what we're trying to do with the Brain Health Project is like, how do we create brain healthy communities? We're doing it with middle school students and some high school students through teachers, like training teachers to like teach people how to think, not what to think. But to your point, I think what you were touching on a second ago was just this, how powerful those narratives are, which we were kind of talking about in the beginning. Anyway, but yeah, changing that. And I think, yeah, you have to start pretty young for people to realize that infinite potential or just the malleability, that like you are in control of that actually. Cause I think, I don't know, it's just not something like growing up, I didn't ever think about my brain. Like it just does what you need it to do most of the time. You only really notice if you like forget something or lost something or, you know, like, something bad happens. But, yeah. So I think that like ultimately that would be the dream, right? Is to start having more of that education everywhere.
I still get looped back to this idea that things are too good, and that's why like there's all these issues.
I think that well, when people are not busy, yeah, it's like having too much time on your hands is never a good thing. I was just listening to kind of a random podcast, but it was about it's called Jack the Ripper Retold, but it's not necessarily about Jack the Ripper. It's about like the 5 women that he killed, and it goes into the stories of like their lives and kind of like just brings some more humanity to them. Like it's kind of this interesting, anyway, glimpse into that period of time. But what was fascinating was even then, so it was like a few of them, like I don't know how familiar you are with the whole Jack the Ripper thing, but I really wasn't, so learned a lot. But basically, at the time, they just wrote them off, and they were just like, oh, they're all prostitutes. Like, they actually weren't. Some of them, like, they were just like, oh, a woman that's alone.
Police officers sucking at their job? Yeah. That's shocking.
Yeah, like, it was like a woman that's alone at night. Oh, she must be a prostitute. Like, okay. But that was like just the norm at the time. And so kind of like, honoring these victims. But one of the things, in a couple of their stories, the similar theme that I noticed was that some of them, started out poor, but then some of them actually were like middle class or got to a point where they weren't. And back then, oh my gosh, like just the close quarters living in like London or in those cities, and they had just like, what was it? It was like yellow fever or something, just like tuberculosis, like just these things. And it was like everyone just got sick because everyone was like living close together and no one knew to wash their hands. And just like hard, like it was cold all the time and you had to like work hard to like scrub, and everything was, just the dishes and the cooking and all that was like just intense, like just tough living conditions. And anyway, but then so like they were busy all the time, right? Exhausted. Like these people are like worked to the bone, like the working class. And then when they would move up a class and like could hire someone to like be a maid or a housekeeper or have that, then it's like, then they just start drinking, and then they have alcohol issues, and then they leave their marriage, and then they wind up on the street and then get murdered by Jack the Ripper. So it's
this will happen to every one of you listeners if you move up. Okay, so just stay in the working class.
But it's to your point of, it's like when life is too good, you just have like idle time is not good for humanity. Like you need to have purpose. That's something that we've really found through some of our research, is that purpose is incredibly important. And I think when it's like, yeah, I have to like go milk the cows and like, take care of my 10 children and do like, it's like, but then when it's like, oh, you have a nanny that's taking care of the kids and you're doing it, like, it's like, well, what am I here for? Right. And then you just, anyway, find something to entertain yourself or to numb yourself or to, not deal with emotions because you have too much time to think. And so I do think that there is a big, I think it's huge having things and responsibilities that you need to do that. So
when you look at your own end goals, what were they? Did you just keep upping them to be like, oh, I want to get a degree? Or from day one, you're like, I'm going to get my PhD?
I don't know. My mom has her PhD. And so I just thought like that was my example of just like normal. Everyone's normal is like, you don't know it's not normal until you kind of leave the nest. But she has her PhD in psychology. My dad's also a psychologist.
Nice.
And
who would have thought that somebody with smart parents would end up smart?
But what's funny is my mom actually she would never say she's smart. She's like, you get your brains from your dad. And I'm like, Mom, you're the one with the PhD. It's so interesting. Like she got that label because she's a middle child. Her older brother became a doctor, like a medical doctor. And her younger sister was an engineer. But like growing up, her parents were like, oh, Jason and Joan can be doctors, Janet can be a nurse. And like she just stuck that label, even though I'm like, you went all the way up, like you got the highest degree that you could in your field and you're doing something you love.
And it's weird that like her entire life, nobody externally maybe ever challenged that.
Well, I challenge it. Like I'm like, no, Mom, you're smart. And she's like, she just doesn't. Anyway, so back to challenging these old things. But I think when we're young, like we're so impressionable to those, and it really matters. Just kind of, I think So I always thought that was a lie. And the reason I thought it was a lie is because my entire like success has been about like proving everyone wrong. Sure. And so I was like, no, like you need, like I remember like actively telling people like, no, I'm going to tell my kid that he's worthless and a loser all the time. I know, crazy stuff. When you have a kid, you're like, I was insane. And it's because like I was told that a lot. And that was like my core motivation to prove. I was like, cool, I'll prove everyone wrong. And it's really easy to prove everyone wrong when nobody believes in you. Yeah. And so that's like, it's hard for me to see this other side, because then I have to realize like, oh, I was special. I was one of the incredibly rare people that does well when people say negative, bad things, or when people don't believe in them. I was just going to say that. Yeah. Like because I've like have a bunch of employees, and through the years I've tried, and motivating them how I like to be motivated, and it has not worked. I was just going to say, yeah. Do you think that, or, experience in terms of like what one person needs or is motivating versus another, and it's fascinatingly different. But I think to your point, it's like there's the extreme end of the spectrum where it's like I don't agree with the, everyone gets a trophy thing. Like, that's not healthy either. Just telling everyone that they're awesome all the time. I don't think that's right. But I do think planting seeds of possibility.
Yeah, well, if you tell, like, that thing is, if you tell everyone they're awesome all the time, they might just luck their way into things. Like, I had never raised money for a company before, so I wasn't scared of doing it. And it would be hard. I raised $1 million in like 8 days.
It's amazing.
And I did it all over the phone without a deck. And then I met other people that were raising money, and they were just like, I've been spending 6 months on this. And of course, my response is, well, I'm clearly better than you.
You figured something out.
But no, it was that it's like there's this like there's this attitude that's like I'm untouchable, and that really comes off to people. So like that's the thing is, you tell a kid he's awesome his whole life. Of course, that means he's probably going to get punched in his face real hard at least once, right? But besides that, that means that he's like willing to take moonshots. And it seems to be like the people that get to the moon are people who are just like wanted to go to the moon, right? And it's like most other people are like, well, that's not possible. Mm-hmm. And so that's why like I'm super against, everybody getting a trophy. But then I think, like, well, maybe if you, like, there's this concept that the world will knock down you. So all you should is build people up because the world will knock them down when they go out there. And I'm like, well, I think that's going to cause a lot of mental health issues because they like have a poor concept of how the world is.
Yeah. Man, parenting, teaching, it's tricky. Because I think, it depends on it's nature and nurture. So I do think though, I am fascinated by people like you that it's like, right, exactly what you said of like, okay, well, I'm going to prove you wrong, or like I'm going to take like just the resilience to be able to just be like, yeah, I can do it, or like anything is possible, which as you're saying, like didn't come from anyone else telling you it was possible. You were just like, never tried it, I'll do it.
Yeah, and so that's why I always tell people like the biggest advantage you can have is to be dumb. Because if you're smart, here's the deal. Most PhD professors never, ever, ever run successful businesses. Ever. And the reason why is because they're too smart. So they map things out and they think them through. So like, this is what I've done my whole life. I've had an idea for something. Mm-hmm. I've started it. And then I've realized this is the worst idea ever. But I'm too deep. I'm too committed. I'm too far in. And I'm like, cool, I guess I just got to figure this out. Where somebody's really smart, they'll like weigh all the options and be like, oh, I don't want to do this. And then they like, so they never go forward.
Yeah. Risk tolerance.
Yeah. I guess it's this like end goal of that like failing is bad. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't know why, like, the reason failing's bad because people never ask, well, what happens if I fail? And then you realize it's not that bad. Mm-hmm. Like I just bought a pretty sizable house, and in my head has popped the idea of like, oh, what happened if I like couldn't afford this? I'm like, oh, they just take it away, and then I rent an apartment. Like it's like, oh, it's not actually like you just think of these things as like, what like what happens if it's like, oh, it's not that bad.
Yeah, playing out the worst, like play it out to the very end of like, okay, so then what? And then what? And then
ask why 7 times to find out the real answer. You heard that?
No, I haven't, but
yeah, ask why like yeah, I don't know. Next time, well, I don't see it. I was going to say next time a guy breaks up with you, I feel like it's probably the other way around. So okay, next time you break up with a guy, just have, you tell him like, oh, well, it's just our personalities are different, but it's really that his room's dirty. And so he's got to ask why like 7 times to get there.
That's funny.
Okay. So you're new to this. You've been there 2.5 years. You spent how long of your life in college? 10 years?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Crazy. Scholarship or paying out of pocket or debt?
Scholarships.
Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah.
What does the next 20 years look like? Like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah. I think
now that you have all this fancy titles and degrees and cool stuff.
Like when I first graduated with my PhD, everyone's like, go you, like the world's going to be your oyster. This is exactly what we're talking about. Not helpful, because then you realize, no, nobody wants to pay you what you're worth. And you're in this
or you have a bad self-image of what you're worth. Like you think that that piece of paper equated to you being worth a lot, when all it equated to is that you're really good at reading a book and passing a test.
Yeah.
From one perspective.
And or right, that degree would like carry some weight into the ease of finding a job. I think that's like a big misnomer that I wish someone would have just prepped me a little bit for. And also it's like, if like I knew I didn't want to go into traditional academia. So like I'm actually not a professor, like I'm research staff. And so for those that are like interested in going more into say industry or like just, there's a lot of different ways you can apply a PhD. And the reason most of them end up starting their own thing is because, like I said, you come out and you're kind of, you're too, you don't have enough years of experience working. So like, but you're overqualified for like entry level things, but you don't have enough years of experience to be really like, leadership level. So like you're in this weird middle ground. And then, yeah, it's just, anyway, so I feel like, so it took me a bit. So I'm really fortunate. So I did both my master's and my PhD at UT Dallas. And so I was at the Center for Brain Health for my PhD. I was working with Dr. John Hart, graduated, worked in a hospital for a bit because I needed to figure it out. I was working, so my undergrad and master's are both in speech language pathology. Oh, so cool. Yeah, so I was a speech therapist doing adult inpatient rehab with like stroke and brain injury patients. I struggle with my S's,
so maybe we can work on that.
Can't help you there. I didn't go the Arctic route, but yeah, so
every dead end, I'm like, oh, here's an opportunity. You're like, nope.
So yeah. Anyway, so I ended up, we got a grant to study the neuroscience of kindness, compassion, and empathy. And so that was what I got hired to do 2.5 years ago. And so anyway, it was kind of the perfect thing because it was this mix of like, I'm at a university, I get to be involved in research, but I'm more so part of a program that's really involved in the community and like do something that, and I didn't know it at the time, but now, like in hindsight, I can see why that was so appealing. Was like I'm getting to still learn, but I also am getting to interact with people, and
you get paid this time.
And I get paid, and using kind of like with a clinical background, like really liking to see those light bulb moments or to actually help people and see them improve or make a difference in their life. Anyway, so it was really just, I would say, within this last. And by the way, the whole time I was doing my PhD, I was like, why am I doing this? Like what? Like I went into the field to be a clinician, to work with patients and help them. But here I am doing research and it's like data and numbers and not as fun. But I was curious to understand how it works. The reason I was like, I want to understand the brain so that, when there are things like stroke or injury, we can do better therapy if we understand how that actually works. Because what you learn when you when you study speech pathology is that there's all these different disorders or, things that can affect language and communication. We actually don't really know how any of them work, but we do therapy and it does help people. It's effective. It's a great, career path, but we're like, yeah, we don't know. And I'm like, how is anyone okay just not knowing? Yeah. And so that kind of drove the desire to learn more. But then you get in and then, yeah, it's like the more we learn, the less we know. Like there's just a lot we still don't know. So anyway, so the whole time I was in there, I was like back and forth of like, do I really belong doing this? And I don't really want to be a professor. And so I don't, so yeah, it wasn't like a clear-cut path of like, oh, I want to be this, or I didn't know that I wanted to always get a PhD. Like I had that example, but I kind of like fell into it, which I don't know if that sounds weird.
So when you look at kindness and empathy, what was the other one?
Oh, compassion.
Compassion. Is there ever an instance where it doesn't make sense to be one of those three things?
Sure. I mean, there's such a thing as like, what is it? Compassion fatigue or like empathy burnout, like where it's unhealthy, like where you
don't struggle with that.
Like a lot of like, say like first responders or like healthcare professionals that have to routinely tell people that somebody died, like things, like that, where it's like they kind of, if they felt that deeply for every single one, like there's no way they could continue to do their job in a healthy way. But then there's also kind of the unhealthiness of shutting that off completely. So I think there's always like a right balance.
What is some of the most interesting things you've learned?
I think I'm really interested in, there are so many different avenues or connections between the brain and other sciences. Like, for example, like circadian rhythms and sleep, which I guess is a branch of brain science, or like the microbiome, I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, that one's crazy.
So we're kind of embarking on a couple nested studies to learn more about that. But I guess some of the things that are most fascinating are the things we don't know yet, I think.
Great answer. Thanks for that amazing answer. This is really helpful.
Well, yeah, like I think the power of, well, here's one. Okay. So people think that, or I'll just ask you, like, what are things that you can do to keep your brain healthy, like until you're 80 or 100 or however old you live?
All right. So I follow Dr. Amen on Instagram.
Okay.
He puts out a bunch of content on brain scans. So I'm going to just throw out generic things that logically make sense. Don't do drugs. That seems like a good thing to do to keep your brain healthy. Try not to have insane amounts of sugar or anything. Excess of anything is probably not good for your brain. Mm-hmm. Try to sleep. I feel like your brain probably doesn't do very well when you're not sleeping. I struggle with that. Okay, and then here's the stuff that I don't like, but appears to be true. Like words of affirmation to yourself, like positive mindset, being like, and then there's things I do like being thankful, being grateful. I think any way to not have dopamine is very good because you have too much of it. Like you're always doing something. So any way to have no technology around, or you're meditating, or anything to avoid, because like we're always chasing dopamine hits. So like anything to that is probably really good for my brain, because my brain is on like doing a bunch of things all the time, right? And then the brain's very, very complex. So I would think that there's this weird thing where you're an average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you hang around like 5 awful people, you'll be the SIDS. If you hang around like 5 great people, you'll be whatever. And so I think there's all the brain's very complex. So if I was to break it down, those are the answers I would give, which is that like you should be well balanced, and you should not do anything in extreme excess, and you should really pay attention to who you spend time with, because like everything they're saying is somehow ending up in your brain. Yeah.
That's great. Right? Those are great answers. Yeah. How
many gold stars do I get?
You got a lot.
Okay,
yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I
left school in the 3rd grade, so that's the only metric I know.
Everyone loves getting stickers. Yeah, I was just going to add the importance of, so you mentioned, it's important who you're spending time with, but it's also just important that you have social connections, or meaningful ones. Because that's something a lot of people are missing.
I won't say who the person is, but somebody I know, I recently sat with, and he just told me about like stories of his life I never heard before that I could care less about. And I could tell just how filled with joy he was to be able to tell somebody. Like he just hadn't had a friend to be able to tell things to in forever. So after I reminded him, I'm not that guy. Okay. I'm kidding. But it is interesting how, just like listening to people can be like really great therapy for them.
Yeah.
Like I have this weird thing where I have like tons and tons and tons of friends that I'm like really close with. Like I keep in touch on a weekly basis with maybe 100+ people.
Wow.
So like for me, it's like I'm doing really good in the friend department. If I need anybody to talk to about anything about, like I can have somebody.
Yeah.
And so I've been really spoiled in that, and not to realize like, whoa, I'd really hate life if I didn't have that.
Yeah. I mean, we're social creatures. We were designed for connection, and when you don't have it, you see a lot of effects of just increased depression and worse sleep and poorer memory, stuff like that.
Yeah. And I also think there's something good about going through things like that. Like it's like good to feel depressed. Like to know that feeling, or to know, because it builds empathy in a way, right?
Sure. I mean, I think any hard experience is ultimately then allows you to connect with people that you otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Now, because you are an intelligent human being.
See what you did there?
By that, I mean, you've researched all this stuff. How often do you ever get pigeoned or think like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way because I know all this stuff?
Oh my gosh. I get stressed about being stressed because I know about all the negative effects. Or like when I know that I'm not going to get 8 hours of sleep, I'm like, and that's not helpful, by the way. So now I've kind of like learned how to better handle it.
Do you have to get 8? Are you one of those people that's very adamant about it?
Love getting 8. Well, it's more just, I just know that I won't perform my best. Like I'm just not going to be the best version of me.
Is it because you tell yourself that? Like what if you started sleeping 4 hours and telling yourself, oh, this is where I dominate. 4 hours is my sweet spot.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not possible. But I think it was just like experiential. Like I just know how I feel and I know how I feel best. And I'm like, oh, great. Like it's going to be hard, but you're right. It's not helpful. Like I think, if I just slept and wasn't tracking it and didn't know, like, and just solely based on how I felt, like that would be interesting to see.
Yeah. So I never hit deep sleep for the most part. So like I only sleep like, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 hours a night. But I never hit deep sleep. So I'm just always like,
how do you know you don't hit deep sleep? Do you track?
Yeah, I've tracked it. Yeah. And so, an occasional, I don't know, once, twice a year that I'll get like really deep sleep. I'll wake up and I'll just feel like the most amazing version of myself. But I'm like, maybe one day I should do like a sleep study and get to the bottom of this and like do some real stuff. But until then, I'll just keep grinding at this.
Well, what did you use to track it? Because a lot of them are not accurate.
I don't know. Like I've used like Apple Watches and
okay,
Fitbits
yeah.
and smart things.
If it's telling you you're not hitting deep sleep, it doesn't know.
Yeah.
Like the only way to really know is EEG study.
Well, I'll do.
Which is not fun, but yeah.
I mean, the reason truthfully, I know is that my wife is like, hey, like I have like night terrors and I like sleepwalk and I sleep talk and I like all these things. So it's like, that's like kind of a sign that somebody's not hitting deep sleep when they're like, hey, you talked to me for an hour last night in your sleep. You know, it's like I didn't remember any of it. So it's like, I think that's like a good sign that I'm never hitting deep sleep.
I don't know what the rules are around, or like what stage of sleep people can sleep talk or walk in.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like if I'm at certain energy in my sleep, that can't be a good thing.
I don't know. Yeah.
It sounds pretty common.
It's interesting.
It's interesting. I mean, I've done really long fasts before.
Like how long?
Like a week.
Okay. Just water only?
Yeah. See, like the rich person fast is like, oh, I do a juicing, I do a juice cleanse, and it's like I just like to push myself. Like it's like
what? Yeah, what prompted you to want to do that?
I mean, ultimately, I would love to do the Jesus like 40-day fast. I think that would be really cool if I had made it like very spiritual. Like if I like was out in the woods and I like like prayed during these times and like used all my time, energy, and other things just like fixated on God. I think that'd be really cool. But so far, I haven't really done that. So far, it's that I like challenging myself and I like getting uncomfortable. And I also feel really good like after a fast. And it's interesting because like day 3, you want to just everything sucks, but after that, it like gets better. And I don't remember what point I was getting to with fasting. This is what it is. When I'm fasting, like let's say like 4 days in on a fast, I can sleep 2 hours and feel awesome. Like
interesting.
I think your body uses so much energy like digesting food or like other things that it's like that's something nobody ever talks about. That is like there might be something highly coordinated to what you eat. Has to do with like, I mean, people talk like what you eat affects your ability to sleep, but like not eating at all could also mean that like if you don't sleep a lot, you'll be fine.
Interesting. I just did a 24-hour fast yesterday for something, which is the longest I've done. I would like to try like a 3-day one.
So what I recommend is a 24-hour fast once a week and then like a 3-day once a month.
Yeah, that's a good goal for me. I was just listening to an interview with David Blaine, and did you see when he did that fast?
Yeah.
And how he was like I think he was standing on like a pole, and then he like allowed
to hallucinate.
Yeah, he allowed the doctors and stuff to like take all his vitals, and so they did all this research on him, but his like organs were shutting down. But how long did he make it? It was like 30 days or something.
Yeah, but he was standing the whole time, right?
Yeah. He like didn't let himself sleep. There's no way you could not sleep for 30 days.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Unless, surely you would be hallucinating at that point, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's David Blaine. That guy's crazy. Have you done I learned his breathing exercise to be able to hold your breath for like over 5 minutes.
No, it's not something that's ever.
Have you? I mean, are you aware of this exercise though?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm a nerd. Whatever.
No, it's super fascinating. I
met David Blaine outside of one of his shows. It's not like I was out in public. Like I was. I got there early.
You waited to meet him.
No, I got there early, and I like parked, and his tour bus was like here. He happened to get out of his tour bus as I was like walking. And he was, very David Blaine, low energy. And like, I was like, hey, and he's like, hey. And I was like, I don't even think I want a photo. I don't know. It was one of those things of like, I thought he was really cool. So it's like, I'll go to a show. But all it is him doing crazy things that you feel like he's like holds his breath for 10 minutes, underwater. And like, he just does a bunch of crazy shit. And you're just like, yeah, I don't know if this is actually my thing. I think like I can like, it's just as fun to watch it on YouTube is what I realized.
Being there in person didn't elevate the experience.
Yeah. Kind of like I don't really like heights a ton. Like anything where I feel like I could fall off and die instantly. Like that is scary. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I'll start like climbing buildings or like climbing things to like get over that fear. And like that didn't help at all, actually.
Exposure therapy, not helpful. Apparently any fear is actually a fear of death. Ultimately, like it's like your ask why 7 times thing. It's like, well, why are you afraid of bugs? Because at one point they carry diseases and could kill you, or or like you get sick.
Wow, you asked one time. You asked why one time and got straight there.
Or being afraid of I don't know whatever it is, but it's typically a fear of death.
That's interesting. Yeah, I say I'm not scared of death, but having a kid really changed that for me. It's not where I'm scared. It's that I'm just like, oh, I really don't want to. Like before, I wasn't scared of it. And I didn't really care either.
Yeah.
But now that you have a kid and a wife, it's like, well, I really don't want this.
Right. People need you.
Yeah. And I have I have good insurance policies. So if it does happen, we're set. That is one of the weirdest things, like getting insurance for like life insurance. You're like, oh, this is for if I die unexpectedly at a young age. What time do you go to bed in the morning or at night? Are you a schedule person? Do you follow like a strict schedule?
I would like to. I'm pretty disciplined and regimented. I generally, if I could have it my way, I would literally be in bed at 9:00 every night because I'm a morning person. So like, even if I go to bed late, like I'm not able to
cat or dog person?
Sleep into me. Dog person, morning person, have a dog.
What kind of dog?
He's German, half German Shepherd and then part Australian Shepherd and Anatolian Shepherd. Just another kind of shepherd. Okay. I didn't know what it was until then. But yeah, he looks mostly German, but his ears are down. Oh. And he has like a fluffier Aussie coat.
Cool.
He's cool.
What do y'all do? What are some activities?
I actually just signed him up for agility classes. So we're going to learn. We start next week. But he's just like really smart and really energetic and athletic. And I mean, German Shepherds and Australian Shepherds are just like, teach him.
I have a friend who's a police officer, and he's got a German Shepherd that only knows calls in German.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's like if you want him to do anything cool, you have to speak German to him.
Love that.
Yeah. And it's a big German Shepherd, which are way cooler. I really want one. I really want a Maine Coon cat. I'm a cat guy. I like cats.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Maine Coons?
Yeah. Aren't they like are they half something?
No, they're just these enormous cats.
They're just big. Okay.
They're super fluffy and big, and they have really like pointy, tall ears that then have like fur that grows at the end of it. They
okay.
Look, like,
I think my friend has one actually. They're cool. They're cool looking.
Yeah, that's the only scam I've ever been involved in. I thought I was buying one. It was a scam.
Oh man.
The scam was so good. They sent me a fake tracking number for like a fake animal shipping company.
Oh my gosh.
I build websites, so like that's a pretty impressive scam.
Yeah.
Like, here's your tracking number.
Oh my gosh. And then it just never came?
Yeah. Well, they just like kept requesting more money for like, oh, like customs needs this. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a ship from Oklahoma. It's like everything got weird. And I was like, okay.
Oh man.
So That's my one time being scammed.
I guess now you got that out of the way and can know what to look for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many red flags in retrospect. It was right when it was like April of 2020. So it was right when COVID hit. And I remember I always kind of luck out with things. And so I was like, hey, I want an all white Maine Coon with blue eyes. And they're like, well, there's actually like a huge wait list on these. This one was taken, but the person can't pay because of COVID. And I was like, I did it again. I'm calling every one of my friends. Guess what? 2-year wait list, straight to the top of it. Like, I'm I'm like, yep, comes in today. I like bought like all these like things for it.
Oh my gosh.
And then,
that's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. So,
but also how funny of like when we want something really badly, like that we'd either, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it was very convincing. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is like, I've asked people that like have been involved in Ponzi schemes or like study Ponzi schemes, and like everybody knows they're being scammed. They want to believe it. Like because I had this question of why are no Ponzi schemes promising like 8% returns? And somebody's like, because that doesn't attract the type of people that buy into Ponzi schemes. Mm-hmm. Like there's a certain type of person, they're looking for the 20% return. They're like, whether they're greedy or whatever the case is. And so even though they know it's a scam, they're just like, well, I'll go into this.
Did you follow any of the Elizabeth Holmes Theranos stuff?
Yes.
Or the recent trial? Yeah.
I didn't follow the trial. I read the book, Bad Blood, and then I watched the documentary.
Okay, I've seen the documentary.
What happened with the trial?
So it's going on right now. So I've been following along with the Dropout podcast, and she just took the stand. They were like debating whether she was actually going to testify or not. She did. And what was interesting, what made me think of that was all the people the investors and how they were like, but it's like, that's like the world of investing. I mean, like it's like things that sound too good to be true, or they're not ready yet, or they're, and it's like
that's not the world though. Like Uber doesn't sound too good to be true.
True. Or it's like, I guess in the tech, health, biotech world. Yeah. And so because the majority of the investors were not in that industry.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just fascinating how like they all were just like had FOMO and wanted to be included. And
do you know how Bernie Madoff got like how he blew it up so bad, so well? I don't know he every time somebody said they want to invest, I go, oh, sorry, we're not accepting new clients at this time. Every time. And then they would call them 3 weeks later and go, hey, somebody just requested their money out. We have a spot for X amount of cash. You need to have it, or somebody else will fill it. People are like, I wired it.
Yeah, like there's a thing where they were saying she set this deadline where it was like, we have to have it it was like a New Year's deadline, like end of the year. And it was like, it was 2 weeks. Like it was just, this thing. And they're like, what do we do? And then they're like, yeah, it's hard. They're like, is there an extension possible? No. Okay. Wire the money. Wire, $5 million.
Yeah. It's weird. When people are already in, they like go in even deeper. That is the issue is like that's the hard part with relationships. Like when people have a good relationship with somebody and then the person scams them because it's like, oh my God, I thought I knew you. We almost didn't get scammed, but we were like doing an investment deal with a guy and I like found something wrong with the deal and I like mentioned it. And instead of just being like, oh, mistake, whatever, I'll get it fixed, he just like went crazy on me. And I was like, ooh, this is like a good sign.
Wow.
And this is somebody that I had like dinner with him and his wife and his kids. I met all his kids. And they were all like super well behaved. His wife is super sweet. And they met like in college and like just all these like him and I had a bunch of good conversations and talks and everything. And so, he just went like completely berserk. And it's been troubling me for like now like 4 or 5 months.
So then did you just like call it off? Or,
I just was like, I was like, okay, well, I'm out of this, and he's like, good, I don't want your money. He's like, he just went like crazy. He even went more crazy. And I write every text message, like I'm going to eventually run for president. That's like my end goal. And so I write every text message that this will come out when I run for president. I would like it to look good. So like, he's like calling me like a spoiled brat and like all these weird names, it's like he was calling me a little boy in every text message, which to think that he thinks I'm like immature enough that somebody called me a little boy would faze me is like hysterical to me. It's like what vibe did I get off to where like do I look like an unconfident person? Like if somebody like
yeah.
And so I was just like I just kept writing over and over like, hey, did something happen today? Like what is like you're acting very psychotic. I guess it's kind of like gaslighting them in a way, but I wasn't like trying to. I was like seriously like, hey man, like everything's been really normal for like we've talked for over a year.
Yeah.
Everything's been normal for a year. Like where did this craziness come from?
Yeah. Well, that, yeah, it always has more to do with the other person than anything to do with you. Yeah. But
okay. So Theranos, what's happening in the trial? So she went on stand.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, it's just been the last like month or so, and they've just she's kind of like the last witness, I think, that they're going to use. And so she's just, her side is up, and then the prosecution will have a chance to cross-examine her. So that should be interesting.
I mean, she did the best thing possible. She got married and had a kid. I mean, that's really the smartest move you can make.
Yeah. Her baby literally was born like a week before the trial started or something.
Sure. I mean,
like,
there isn't a smarter move you can make.
Was
because it makes it really hard to put her behind bars when you have a newborn baby.
Mm-hmm.
There's also this weird, and I don't say this to be empathetic, but there is this weird thing when somebody is literally a psychopath. You know, like she is a psychopath. She doesn't blink. She does, like if you read like every sign of like a psychopath and how they have to behave and how they manipulate things, that is her to a T.
Mm-hmm.
So like she is literally a psychopath, and so it's like there's also this thing of, like her job, like her going on the stand is her thinking that she can like charm her way out of this.
Totally.
Yeah.
And she did. She's up there and they describe it. She's just like, has like the hint of a smile. She's just calm,
doesn't
confident.
talk in a man voice anymore.
Yeah. Not doing like the super deep Elizabeth Holmes voice. And yeah, she's just like playing this part. Like I was just this entrepreneur and I, was acting in good faith and didn't, every time I talked about things, it was.
Yeah, and then I'm going to blame everything on my 55-year-old boyfriend that was manipulating me. Like, I'm sure she'll really blame him for everything.
That's the trailer for next week's episode is like getting into the claims of abuse from Sonny.
Sonny, that was his name.
Yeah. Sonny Belwani. It's a good name.
Belwani.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Elizabeth Holmes. What a crazy, and it was so like, when it all went down, what was so crazy is like, she was one of the examples I would use of like successful college dropouts. Like when I would give my pitch list of like Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, I was like, Elizabeth Holmes dropped out at 19 from Stanford, now has a $10 billion healthcare company. Like always list her. And then it went down. I was like, what? I listened to her the entire book on her in 2 days. It's like a 12-hour book.
Oh, wow.
Because I was that obsessed with it. I mean, it's just like, I was just so intrigued.
It's so interesting.
Because, her ideas is brilliant if you know nothing about how like things work.
Right.
And it's amazing she made it as far. And again, it's that power of just being like confident in things. And it's like, well, I guess if you like, that's where should everybody get a trophy? Because like she clearly made it all the way to the end. From like complete confidence,
just
nothing else.
Sheer will that like I'm going to make this, like I'm going to bend reality to make this happen. And whether
I was so bothered by how awful her hair was. Like just shave your head at this point. It was like, you know what I'm talking about?
What was she doing? No, like it was always like pulled up or pulled back.
No, it's like when her hair was down, it was like somebody got like a flat iron pan and just like pressed it. It was like perfectly. It was. Can you pull up photos to put on the TV? I could Google to show you actually.
Yeah, I need to see this. I saw the documentary, but it was a couple years ago, so I don't really remember. Elizabeth Holmes. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just Google Elizabeth Holmes here and then go to slide 4 so people can see it.
It's definitely not her best.
She's got pretty eyes. That's about it. I love that she would wear black turtlenecks to be like Steve Jobs. I just forgot that.
Just so fascinating, yeah.
To everyone watching this on YouTube, so this is her when she's uncaught. Now go 3 of her. Down one, left one, that one. And this is her during court. Look, her hair's curled. Her hair, like it's like everything's different. Yeah. Not attractive though.
She's got to get the jury to sympathize with her.
Yeah, that's another thing that's like you often think, and maybe this is just from a guy's perspective, but it's like, okay, if you are an attractive, ambitious female, you can crush in entrepreneurship because there just isn't a lot of attractive young entrepreneurs. So like she's like unattractive and not very likable with the dark voice, like, and how she dresses. Like, you know, like if you thought, okay, I'm trying to raise $1 billion for my company, your move probably wouldn't be, I want to make sure to wear turtlenecks everywhere.
It's super interesting, though, how like but everyone that invested in her was just like, she was super persuasive. And so like,
there's a tactic where you present multiple options to people. So they feel like, okay, I'm definitely going with you. Now it's which option do I go with? Mm-hmm. Or price anchoring. Do you know what that is?
No.
So you ask me like, hey, what does it cost to build a website? I'm like, well, it's $200,000. But this week it's going to be $50,000. And if you don't want XYZ feature, it'll be $20,000. People are like, what? I can get a $200,000.
They feel like they got a deal. Okay. Yeah.
And so I don't do that, by the way. We just tell people what it could be. Day one, we're like, it's $20,000.
Yeah.
But I wonder what persuasive tools she would use. I mean, nobody ever saw the technology, and it does sound like, okay, and she did get the Walgreens contract, which is like something to raise on. She did have this insane board. Like you get to a point where you don't have to do anything. And that's the thing is like, once she got the board together, she's like, look, I have like, look at who's on my board. I don't like there is no verification process. Cause like, well, all these people had to do due diligence.
Right. Everyone assumed the other people did due diligence.
Yeah.
None of them. But yeah, she was, I think, really strategic in the people she approached, that they were not people in the industry or familiar with anything she was doing. And yeah, just it was so strategic.
Yeah, because if you, like, if somebody told me, like, oh, Kim Kardashian's going to raise $1 billion, I'd be like, yeah, no problem. Right? Like, I mean, let's say, let's say like 30-year-old Kim Kardashian, not famous. Let's pretend she's not famous. But she's still an attractive human being. And she would go out there not wearing a turtleneck. Let's just be real. I'm not calling her slutty, but she wouldn't be wearing a turtleneck. And like, I would be like, that's who you would think would be able to pull this off. And so somehow she did it like being like manly. Like she was very masculine. And like you would just think that like, you know, I'm not a woman, but I was thinking as a woman, I'm like, cool, I have some disadvantages, right? There aren't a lot of female entrepreneurs. That's a big disadvantage. I'm pretty. And so you could even say that's a disadvantage. You'd be like, well, if I'm pretty, then like people think that I'm just a pretty face, right? So maybe that's it. It's like just because she's kind of got like a butter face.
Honestly, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I think even being like just like a woman in science, and then if you're even just decent, halfway decent looking, it's like then people don't think you're smart. So that's fun. But it's like, why can you not like, you know, be? And for a long time, I mean, anyway, this is kind of going down a different direction, but
what are you talking about? You're very attractive.
I do think it's interesting that like I actually didn't put myself in the box. Like it wasn't until, I don't know, it was like maybe one of my last couple years of my PhD that I was like, oh, I'm a scientist. Like I would never call myself that, because I was like, well, I'm like not like some middle-aged dude in a lab coat, like with white hair, you know, like, or like because I like other things, like, I don't know, teaching yoga and doing art, and I care about like being put together, or how, like, you know, just like I wear makeup, like, like, you know, like I do, like, I'm like, oh, I do things that like didn't fit this like stereotype of a scientist. And so I was like, oh, was not be one. And then, but it was like the subconscious thing. Like I never said that to myself. And then at one point, I think someone either said something or something, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess I am one. But even now it's like, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or what, but sometimes I'm just like, am I? It's weird.
Yeah, it's you clearly don't lead with that. In the way that you immediately, when I'm like, yo, you're super smart, you're like, well, let's challenge that. I'm just a scientist with a PhD. You say so nonchalantly. I just have both my parents have them. It's just kind of what you do in my household.
My dad doesn't have one, but I think also I don't know. It's like I'm a person, right? Like I want to be a person before I'm like a title.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be objectified, even, because like when we look at objectification, we look at typically as looks, right? But like you can be objectified for your degree on your wall, for the car you drive, we can objectify for all these things.
Exactly.
And you're like, hey, I am a scientist who's attractive and all these things, but like that's not like who I am as a person.
Right. Like let's not define me by that and like think that because I think that my pushback is like I'm not whatever comes to mind when you say neuroscientist with a PhD, like I'm not in that box. So that's why I'm just like, let's just from the get-go
I
get that straight.
I totally get it. It's like the worst thing somebody can ever say to you is I have a friend just like you. It's the worst thing somebody can ever say to you. And it's like, oh, really? Like, you have a friend that reads 100 books a year like me? Oh, you do? Because I'm pretty much the only person I know that reads 100 books a year. So if I didn't know you had a friend that read 100 books a year. That's cool. Oh, and you have a friend and they have they have the cutest baby and hot wife? Cool. Really, too? Oh, you mean they own a business? That's how you judge us, that we both own. Like, that was the thing, right?
Like, we're entrepreneurs, okay.
Yeah, but it's the worst thing. It's like, somebody just like you. They're attractive and also have a PhD. You're like, oh, great, that's who I am.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I wonder if it's fine if it's in the sense of like, oh, like you, or if it's something specific, like it's like, oh, like your laugh or like the way that you like make people feel comfortable or like, you remind me of so-and-so like in that ways, but not like I know someone just like you. It's like, cause I'm pretty sure no one's like me.
Yeah. Somebody, what did somebody say? Who was the con artist that somebody compared me to?
Oh no.
Oh, it was, this is a true, okay. So I always said I didn't go to college. I went to a community college for like a couple semesters and, I had a professor and he was like I would say I haven't touched him in a while, but I'm friends with him to this day. Mm-hmm. And he saw Wolf of Wall Street. And I don't watch movies, so I know nothing about this.
Really?
He goes, hey, I saw a movie this weekend. It's called Wolf of Wall Street. The guy reminded me, he reminded me just like you. And so, come on, I don't watch movies, but I think I've just gotten a compliment, right? So I excitingly go to this movie, right? And I'm just horrified. I'm like, this is what? I'm like, what? And he was like, yeah, he's like highly ambitious. He's like, he's able to get things done. He dresses nice. He's very confident. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like all the good, and like in retrospect, he realized like how, but in my mind, I was like, I thought that I thought it was The Pursuit of Happiness.
Yeah.
Have you seen that movie? Yeah. So it's like, if somebody's like, oh, you're like Will Smith in Pursuit of Happiness, I'd be like, oh my goodness, like a dude that's homeless and like has everything, just like brings it like, the American Dream, right? It's like one of my favorite movies. But no, it's like I don't even remember I just remember just like sitting there being like, this is what people think of me.
Oh, that's terrible. So why don't you watch movies?
I think there's two reasons.
Is it intentional or you're just like, I don't have time?
I just don't. Well, there's several things. Okay, so the first thing is I'm just like pretty much uninterested in them. The second thing, which is probably the reason why, is I'm not able to sit still for typically longer than an hour. So like I'm able to do these like 3-hour podcasts, and then that's it. So I'm not able to sit still for a long time. And you could say, well, it's just not a good enough movie to keep your attention. And then the third thing is it never became a habit of mine. So like a lot of people have like a habit of like, oh, I grew up watching movies, or I grew up doing, it's like I just never did that a lot. My parents were like, I guess, I don't know. My dad watched like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, and I was like, family, I guess, was super into that. I don't know. There's always things that are way more interesting to me than a movie. But like I bought an enormous TV. And then it came in and I was like, I don't even watch TV. Like I just did this. Like I just spent $3,000 on an 85-inch TV. Like the best of the best. Maybe it's 87. Just an enormous TV.
Yeah.
We just took it down because we're moving. But and I was like, I don't even watch TV. Like I just bought it for like, I guess I was like, oh, I guess it will look cool in the house. I did it more of like a design piece.
Right.
I do watch UFC fights. Again, like it's 15 minutes. It's quick. It's fast. Mm-hmm. So I think there's just something about sitting there for 3 hours or 2 hours. Sure. I have watched all like the Bourne movies. I think those are cool.
Yeah, those are good.
But yeah, so you don't watch movies either?
I'm not a movie or a TV person. I mean,
You watched The Office though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
There's a few shows here and there that I've watched, but like generally it's just not in my day to day.
Do you ever meet people that purposely say things to cause a rise? Like if somebody's like, "Oh, I love The Office," they're like, "Oh, I don't like The Office." Like they just want to be that person that's always the outlier.
Yeah, always. There's always.
All right, sorry, I cut you off. That. Continue.
Oh no, I mean, I just, like I haven't. I don't know. There's like too much stuff I need to do.
So let's dive into what you do every day.
Okay. So every day is a little bit different. So I guess to give people context, so the Center for Brain Health, it's translational research. So, and it's cognitive neuroscience. So people think neuroscience and they think a lot of like lab coats and brain scanning. We do have our own imaging center. So we have 2 MRI machines where we are scanning people. But a lot of the cognitive piece is studying things like attention, memory, executive functions, things like organization, planning, looking at things like stress, anyway. So kind of these ways that you use your brain, your frontal lobe specifically is what we focus on a lot. So a lot of my stuff is just like computers. Like I have a pretty regular looking office. But what's cool about our center is that we really focus on making programs or having trainings or doing things that everyday people can participate in. So we have a lot of different lectures and things that are just open to the community. Like we have monthly.
Do you teach at these lectures ever or give these lectures?
I have given one, but a lot of the time we fly in people that are way cooler than me and more experienced and or just like world renowned. So like next week is Dr. Ian Robertson, and he's going to talk about like the science of confidence. And he's in Dublin, so it's actually going to be just live streamed from there. But anyway, so we have those once a month. Even
flying in?
Yeah, normally they fly in, but he actually comes in a couple times a year, but he's not going to be there in person. But yeah, just things like that are fun, intended for a lay audience, so people can come. And,
like, what do you do on your computer? Like, I want the actual specifics.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, what emails are you sending? Who are you emailing?
So we have. Okay, so my job, my title has transitioned a little bit. I don't actually know what it is right now even, but
nice.
For a while, for the last like 2 years, I've been head of operations for the Brain Health Project. So this is the Brain Health Project is our biggest research study. It's our desire it's a 10-year study. We just kicked it off like right when COVID started in March 2020, did our first pilot, but like essentially building all the parts and pieces of that of like, everything from marketing and the emails and the communications that participants get to we're actually building this online dashboard that we work with. Anyway, we're just like, there's a lot that goes into that, the user experience and the flow and all that.
I run a company that builds, websites and websites.
Yeah, exactly. And then aspects of the actual research of what are our questions and working with our other scientists and biostatistician to set those questions. And then, what's on the assessments, what's going to the training, how we're deploying the training, kind of the content gamification. So now I've kind of moved more into that user experience and how we're delivering the content or the training really. And so because everything we used to do was in person. So we do in-person like group trainings, with whether it's athletes or veterans or corporate executives. And
do they pay for these trainings?
Yes, depends. Like we have like grant funding for some military stuff so that they don't have to pay for it. Like there's certain things, but usually the corporate executives, yes. And so those used to be done always in group in person. And so now with the project, it's putting that all online so that we can scale so that people can have access to it. And then our ambitious study is to really understand what is brain health? It hasn't been defined. Usually it's studied in the context of disease. So it's like injury or disease, waiting till something goes wrong and either trying to detect it sooner or figure out a cure rather than just, how can we be proactive? So that's kind of the bigger goal of the study. But my actual like day to day is really just like meetings around like keeping it running and what are, we are constantly so we're at, just the other day I checked, we were at like just under 11,000 participants. So our goal is to have like 12,000 each year. And so with those kinds of numbers, we have the opportunity to do some more nested studies. Like I was mentioning microbiome or things looking at diet, sleep, We have like long COVID I was talking about. So kind of putting things in place with different partners and collaborators. We get to collaborate with scientists from universities across the country and even internationally. And so, yeah, it's a lot of like kind of setting things up, getting them in place. We're doing one looking at hormone replacement therapy for like postmenopausal women, like just like all kinds of stuff.
Are you going to start putting out your own content, like as far as like podcasts and stuff like that?
So, yeah, my idea was to start just like, because I was like, man, I'm just learning cool stuff all the time. And I just want to be able to share it with my friends. And I never really did. And so, yeah, so my idea was like, just because we're having different lectures each week or all these different topics. And I was like, I just want a place to kind of share that a little more. So that was what I started doing. And so, yeah, the goal is eventually I created the trailer. That's
so you don't have an active podcast out there?
No.
Oh, you just have a trailer.
I made the trailer this summer. And so nice. It's coming. Just building the anticipation, you know.
Up to 12 signups, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
We one time we launched a product to like a Facebook group of like 500,000 people. And we got one sign up over the course of like 6 months. And we're like, all right, that didn't work.
Yeah, so what did you learn from that?
It was engagement in a Facebook group doesn't equate to people giving you money, is what we learned.
Good takeaway.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, well, it was like this is hilarious. We bought a Facebook group for introverts. And it was like 500,000 members and it had tons of engagement.
Interesting.
And so we were like, hey guys, we're going to make like a paid community where you get, weekly live streams of people that are like, like can help you perform, but like all these things, right? And just like one person signed up.
Oh my gosh. But I think, but just as I've kind of, so you asked me what the next 20 years looks like. I have no idea. But I think it's been evolving, and I've kind of learned, and kind of how I was saying, like along my career path, I didn't really know how exactly I fit or how I was wanting that to look in the world. And I think what I found just this year that I really enjoy is getting to communicate science in a way that's relatable and in a way that, is applicable.
So right now, a very common term is like follow the science or I believe in science. Like my favorite is I saw a sign that's like it's like this sign of like we at this household we believe in science, we believe Black Lives Matter. It's like the most woke sign of everything. And there seems to be this, and I didn't go to college, there seems to be this thing where people don't understand that sciences can contradict each other, because like sciences isn't fact, like it's science, like it's study. And so there tends to be this like follow the science. And it's like, okay, well, the science tells us, according to like Israel's study of 2.2 million people that had COVID, the natural immunity is 6 to 13 times higher than the vaccine. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, we're still pushing people that have gotten natural immunity to get the vaccine. So if we're going to follow the science, that's fine. But like, why are we just like, it's this weird, like follow the science if it's the science that I promote.
Totally. It's the confirmation bias. Like you just want to only pick the piece of evidence that support your view. So that's dangerous.
I think I'm going to make like I like to design art and then have like an artist like do their own thing with it, right? But I would like to do something that like it will be like a Webster's dictionary of what the word science means. Because it's just like I'm following science, and it's like, okay, well, when you're wearing a face mask outside, you're not following science. And if you're wearing a cloth mask that isn't an N95, you're not following science. And it's like I just see all these things, and I'm like, this is not science. When you're sanitizing everything, like I sat next to somebody that had 2 masks on a plane. And then she proceeded to pull out wet wipes and wipe everything. And I just remember thinking like, oh, a cold is going to wipe you out, right? Like, you know, I mean, that's like there's this weird thing during COVID where people like eliminated all germs. And it's like, I know nothing. I've just heard things growing up. But from my experience, I was told that like when a kid like picks up things and puts in his mouth, that it builds his immune system. And so it makes it that he can fight off things in the future. So it seems like if we eliminate and everything sanitized, then you'll just get sick really easy.
Right. Yeah. The hand sanitizer like kills the natural things that are on your hands that then fight that. And so it just makes you more vulnerable.
Yeah. So we're just living in a real crazy time where like only one side, it's the left side, they're the only one shouting follow the science. And then the right side is like Rand Paul being like, all right, well, here's science. And like, well, I don't like that science.
Yeah, there's all kinds of science that like there's different views, different theories, and the way you set up the study, like we kind of talked about in the beginning, is like we're all human. And so we all have our own implicit biases, and those things trickle down. It's like it's not foolproof.
So take me through how a scientific study works of people. Like, so if you're like, would you, because I don't trust people. So like, but you know, like I trust people, but you know what I mean? Like I don't trust people. So if like, for example, if you're doing a microbiome study, are you saying, hey guys, we need you to only eat these foods for the next 12 weeks and we'll study you? And I would go, that person totally didn't eat just those foods.
I mean, there's studies on even participant compliance and how like when you're in it, you know, there's placebo effect, there's all these things, but it's like that, yeah, if you know, even if you're in the control group and it's like, oh, just eat as you normally would, but just log what you're eating, they're going to eat a little bit healthier, or they're going to maybe not report the extra cookie or whatever, because they just know that someone's going to look at it. So there's all kinds of effects of.
Yeah. It's kind of like all data sucks.
It's super messy. People, you cannot control for all the variables, which is why this study is exciting, because it's like, it's more of a data mining study than trying to control, so that we actually don't have a control group in ours. It's like you are your own control. So it's you against you, and over time, how you change and what are the different things that you're doing, because everyone's different and everyone's brain needs something different. Like you're thriving on, 6 hours of sleep or 4, and I'm thriving on my 8, and and so it's like you can't.
And I've met Coke addicts that are like super functional.
Hey, yeah, it's like there's but I think to better learn what those things are in terms of just recommendations, everyone just wants you to tell them what to do, and it's like you can't. You gotta figure it out.
It's like we had a guy on that designs instruments. Like he was professor of chemistry for maybe University of North Texas. Incredible, like probably one of the best podcasts we've ever done. Pierre's like, are you going to release it? I'm getting to it. We're a little behind due to the baby. But anyway, he was talking about the airport thing where they swab you. Have you ever been like swabbed and they put it in a machine, tells you, it's like clear, but it's like detecting if like bomb particles are on your hands or whatever. He said those have a 50% fail rate. Like they're accurate 50% of the time. So it's like essentially like flipping a coin. Like it's just to make people feel good.
I'm not surprised.
And what I would love to know is like what percentage of people are like me and you who like question things or explore things or think about things. Because I hear that and I'm like pretty much most things in this way, and everybody I'm around's this way. So it's all I know. I think everybody's this way. But it's like that's not what studies would show, right? Or we wouldn't do most of the things we do.
Yeah. I don't know studies on specifically that, but
where do you find studies? Where do you research studies? Is there like a database for that?
Yeah.
What is it?
Google Scholar.
Oh.
Or like PubMed. Yeah, you can search in there, but sometimes you need access for a lot of them. But they're getting better at being more open access. You'll send me your username and password.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
But yeah, I think that it's interesting, like how personality ties into kind of just believing something versus questioning it, and how like the whole challenging different notions. Because I think that there's a healthy amount of skepticism that helps you kind of, and like a curiosity that's tied in with that, to be like, it's healthy to question things. Yeah.
Yeah, and when does personal responsibility come into play versus your upbringing? That's something I really wrestle with. Like yesterday, a friend texted me and he's like, hey, so-and-so has no money, needs new tires, and her like former boyfriend like beat the hell out of her, and could you help? And it's like, okay, sure, whatever. And all I could think about was like, I was like, this is why we need more good fathers and mothers. And he was thinking like, oh, so they don't raise a guy that beats women. And I was thinking, no, so that a woman knows when she meets a guy like that, like, I'm never going to get near this person. There's something off and scary about them. Mm-hmm. And I often, so it's like, at what point is upbringing that we can blame, or like your own bias and your own paths and the own decisions you've made that have ended up at a place?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's both, but I think it's like, as soon as you're old enough to figure it out, like you can, it's up to you.
It can happen at any age. That's true.
Right.
My favorite is in like entrepreneurship world, we just love to share fake stories about things. So like if you go like entrepreneur Instagram, which I'm not a part of, but you'll find like people like, something you'll see is that like Colonel Sanders started KFC at 55. Have you ever heard that or seen that before?
No.
This is like some motivational speakers will use this. Like, you can start at any age, and then he sold it for $1 billion. No, he sold it to a healthcare executive for $3.5 million. That healthcare executive then blew it up and sold it for like $12 billion or something crazy. Like, wow. He made a couple $1 million. Yeah. It's just like, we just love to we love the underdog story, and so we're just kind of like willing to lie about it. And my also favorite is when you ask somebody if they read a book, and they're like, yeah, I read it, and I just go like, what do you think about like the chapter on blah blah blah, and you'll just see this blank stare. It's like, oh shit, because what it means is like, I purchased the book, or I know about it, or heard a podcast on it.
Yeah, or I mean, it sounds like you retain or have a good system for gleaning information from the content that you intake, but a lot of people read books and don't remember them at all.
Yeah, I struggle. It's all about if I care or not. Like, I can tell you everything about Theranos in that book, right? Because I was just so involved. Mm-hmm. I've read another 100 books since, 200 books since, that I could probably tell you one line from. And sometimes I'm only looking for one little like nugget.
Right.
And that's the thing is like, I don't enjoy reading anymore. Like, I've really stopped. Once I would say the past year and a half, I've really slowed down. Like, very rarely read. I read a bunch of news, like
I was gonna ask what kind of books
like paid newsletters and stuff like that. I'm reading, but like, it's because like I was reading every business book, but it's like what I enjoy is stories. So like biographies and stories, and it's like, but those don't help my business. I just kind of like, whatever. But I feel like in a way they do, because then I like can tell cool stories and meetings and stuff. And so somebody will say something, and I'll be like, oh, it's kind of like when Elizabeth Holmes defrauded blah blah. I can just like give like, here's something interesting about her.
Yeah, just live examples.
They were mixing people's blood.
I feel like I did hear that there was. Yeah, shady stuff.
They needed more blood for the sample to work in their bigger machines that they owned. And so they were just like diluting the blood, and then it was like, it wasn't like lab professors, it was like interns that were like doing this. So nobody knew how anything worked.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible. I'm just curious, since you read a lot, or did read a lot.
I don't know. Before you were an idiot. No.
Well, you said you're slowing down.
No, it's true.
Sounds like you read a lot. What are your favorite books?
So I really enjoy 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
Or Dr. Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Mm-mm.
What? Oh, he's really good.
Maybe I do know. I don't know. Sometimes like...
It was the #1 book in the world for about 2 years.
Okay.
So there's that.
So I should probably check it out.
He's just an interesting person in general. I like Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, kind of all his books. I have a painting of Jocko signed by him behind this thing. Something very disappointing about Jocko is that he's 5'10".
Oh.
Because I don't know do you know who I'm talking about?
I know the book. I haven't read it, but I just have heard of it.
Do you know him or what he looks like?
No.
He looks like a guy named Jocko, right? I mean, he's just enormous. Uh-huh. But then he's 5'10". So I remember thinking he's going to be like, 8 foot tall. So that was a little disappointing. But no, he is still just enormous in person with wise. He's got the Dichotomy of Leadership and Extreme Ownership. And then biographies, like pretty much all of them. I thought Henry Ford's was really interesting. I didn't know that Henry Ford was a racist. And nobody's ever like taught about this. But like in his in his own biography, like his autobiography, he like talks about like not liking Jewish people essentially.
Wow.
And it's like, that's crazy that nobody knows that he's how they haven't been canceled yet.
Right.
And, again, I'm able to like not throw out the baby with the bathwater, which is a very old man term, but it's like it's true. It's like that means nothing to what I think about what his book, and he's just got a lot of really interesting perspectives because he's one of the very few. He's one of the first in modern day society to like become incredibly successful and have like the own federal government wanting to stop that. And so his thing is like, I don't know why y'all are questioning me. I don't know. Like all I did was like develop, like I'm the one who created the assembly line. I had all these brilliant ideas. I help society. I make cars affordable. I've done all these things. And you're wanting to spend time saying that I'm like making mistakes. Like, and so he had all these really strong, he's very libertarian in his beliefs. And I'm like pretty libertarian. So that was like cool to see like somebody from like his era be like super libertarian. You know, so like who was the guy that stole all of what's his name? Tesla's ideas, Nikola Tesla's ideas. Edison. Yeah. So like, you know, Edison was like a terrible human being. Like pretty much he was like a shit scientist or, you know, and he just stole he would hire a bunch of really smart people, steal all their stuff, take credit for it. And so he was like really good friends with Edison, which is really interesting. So you even like think about like 5 people, like average 5 is the most time with, you know. I really love Sam Walton of Walmart's autobiography. You know, he wrote it while he was on his deathbed. So that was kind of, and it's almost how I believe that's how it starts, where he's like saying like, hey, everybody's always saying I should write a book. I should write it down. So here you have a guy that built the largest retail at one point. This is crazy, and I'm almost certain this is true, and you can fact check me and Google it, but it's like at one point in America, 1 in 7 Americans had been an employee at Walmart.
Wow.
Or like 1 in 9 Americans have been an employee at Walmart at one point. That's how big Walmart was. And he has a real, you know, so you see this guy that built this enormous company, right? But every single day he would go dove hunt.
Interesting.
So, and you know, he drove like the old beat up truck. He didn't care about materialistic things or nice things. And so it's interesting that, you know, he really did have, I think people want to paint him as this, like Jeff Bezos type of capitalist. By that, I mean, like you have like Elon Musk capitalists that everybody love. And then you have like Jeff Bezos, where people think, oh, you're kind of gross. Like, you know, because Amazon, like, you know, there's just gross things out of them. And Tesla, nothing ever bad comes out about them. You know, it's always like stuff you like. And so I think that's how people kind of want to paint him because he, you know, he built an enormous company and people want to hate on that. But him as a person is like incredibly humble. He personally paid for like 200 students a year, like 150 students a year to come here from other countries and like do foreign exchange programs and paid like their room, paid like everything while they were here. So he did very charitable things. And he just deeply cared about the end customer. And again, autobiography. So this is his own perspective, right? So I should do a better job of reading maybe a biography and somebody will have a different, you know, be able to give hard evidence or facts or whatever. But essentially his thing is like, the reason we slept 15 people in one hotel room and everybody slept on the floor is because we wanted to pass every cent down to the consumer. And the reason that we would never buy like a jet, even when we were like a huge company, is because we want to pass everything down to the consumer. And so it was like this, like for me, I saw like a love for the average person. And he really wanted things made in America. And so that's like very interesting how far they've gotten from that. At one point, Walmart had a shirt that says Walmart, where everything's made in the USA. And so he even kind of talks about that in his book, I guess, even as they got away from that, but is like, if I can pay like 1 penny more and it be made here, I'll do it. You know, it's like, so he did have like these standards that his kids definitely haven't carried on. And Walmart's a very interesting company in general. You know, they make rules for their executives. Like their executives can't drive Ferraris. Like they're like, even these people are making millions of dollars a year. They like limit because they don't want them to be flashy or showy. That's why they never give it. Like if you look at Forbes billionaires, like top 10, 3 of them are Waltons, and they've never given interviews or anything. So, it's pretty strange. So yeah, biographies like that. So I don't know, a good mix of Anything Ryan Holiday is like my favorite. Are you familiar with him? He's like Stoicism, and he wrote Ego is the Enemy. He wrote all these really great books. He wrote one on the Hulk Hogan sets tape that took down Gawker Media.
Oh.
Are you familiar with Gawker Media?
Yeah.
So they were like an enormous company, and they would just like blast people all day, essentially. And they outed billionaire, first outside investor of Facebook, Peter Thiel, and co-founder of PayPal. They outed him for being gay before he came out. And so he waited 10 years like any psychopath, and then hired somebody full-time and funded an account with $10 million to say, like, your job is to take out Gawker Media. And so they were looking for every lawsuit that would come out against Gawker Media, and they found the Hulk Hogan one. They're like, cool, this is the one I guess is the one they're going to pursue. So secretly funded everything. Nobody had any clue. Gawker was like, because Gawker had, a lot of money, and they're like, how are they still putting up a fight against us? Eventually got like a $300 million settlement. They bankrupted the company. They shut down.
Wow.
And then it was released that he was behind all of it. So it's like kind of psychopathic, but it's also pretty dope.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's crazy.
That's the key. If you have a grudge with somebody, I shouldn't say this on air because somebody will use it against me. But it's like, that is the way to do it, to wait 10 years. But also, if you're still mad 10 years later, that's another issue. But he felt like he was doing something good for society. I mean, they'd always been ousting and doing bad things. And so he felt like, I think it was more than just his like personal thing.
Sure.
And he's a lot like Elon Musk, like very Aspergery. I met him, and it was incredibly awkward. I was like so excited, and he was like, hello. His eyes bounce a lot, So have you ever heard like Elon Musk give a speech?
No.
It's the worst. Yeah, he just like he just kind of hops. It's just really, really hard to follow or vibe with. And I think that's why probably a lot of these crazy scientists are.
I don't know. There's a whole spectrum.
See how I tried to like jokingly put you in a box?
Yeah.
Making sure you knew that was a joke.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. We didn't really talk much science.
That's okay. It's kind of a nice change of pace.
I guess I should have done a better job of asking questions or preparing maybe of what to say. But I did, I like to spitball and just kind of go over things. I really want to hone in more on this like weird word of what science means. I think there could be a whole project around that because we're just really just throwing out the word science.
Yeah.
Just no clue what it actually means.
And it has like, all these different connotations and all this like kind of stereotypes and it kind of confusing.
If I walked into a restaurant and I go, look, I just follow the science. And then I told everyone in the restaurant to vote on who I voted for president. Not one person is saying I voted for Trump. If I was like, I only follow science because like one party has said that and one party has just been like, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really interesting that that science has become political.
Yeah. That it kind of. Yeah, I don't like that science has become political. It shouldn't. I don't think it has.
Do you think it affects your job eventually? Like, if science, is there a point where you eventually have to go? Like, all scientists have to go with a certain narrative.
Well, I mean, I will say
funding.
Yeah, I will say like the funding controls what science is done, and then similarly, the journals that publish the articles control what gets put out there, or like what is science, right? Science is considered a peer-reviewed article. So there's room for a lot of things there.
So Mickey Willis, are you familiar with him?
No.
So he's this conspiracy theorist, documentary maker. He's had over like 1 billion views on his stuff, and all his stuff is banned on YouTube and everywhere. So it's like dark web has made its way. And so he came out with a documentary called Plantemic, like early on, being like, hey, like the virus is real, the pandemic is fake. It was like his thing. And so he had all these like scientists on that were like, were completely ousted once they would go against what they're funding, like once they would go against what they're being paid to say, essentially. And then you watch all these forums on the internet of people talk, they're not a credible scientist, like, people tearing them apart. And so it makes it scary if like science in a box isn't science anymore.
Yeah. I think, yeah. I hope that there's enough, like, I don't know, it's kind of like the more you learn about things, like the less you want to trust them. Because you're like, wait, there's all this, human error, or things like funding sources matter. And so it's like this thing that seemed really...
Yeah, it's like when Monsanto puts together the food pyramid, and it just
Exactly.
happens to be the seeds they sell.
Exactly.
Like, oh, bread is the healthiest thing for me.
Right. And you're like, wait, I've been told, or I've been taking this word as law.
Yeah.
And
like Flintstones vitamins are good for you. My dad still believes that.
I took those as a kid.
Yeah. My dad still to this day takes them.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I haven't done any research on them. I don't know.
Yeah, they have food. Anything that has food coloring in it is not good for you. Any vitamin with food coloring is not good for you.
Yeah. So funny.
Yeah, follow the dollar. That should be a...
Yeah, follow the dollar and then see how that affects the science.
Yeah, because it's so tough. It's like, because everybody has if money funds everything, and that's the thing. If money is like controlled by like the goal, the reason government's got to fund these things, because they're like, oh, well, we're the wholesome government. But like, we had the director of like outbreak disease, whatever. We had Dr. Fauci tell people not to buy masks, not to wear masks, and then come out and say, well, I didn't want every place to sell out and then health workers not be able to get them. So you lied to them. Like, you knew this was a disease that spreaded, that like was a airborne disease, and you gave a press conference told people not to buy or wear masks. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And it's like, he still has a job, and it's like, okay, at this point, it's like, we are like really like if the government was this wholesome agency that's like, oh, well, the reason like private companies can't fund science is because they'll have bias. And it's like, I mean, I just saw a guy like literally lie to the public and then justify him lying.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that's really interesting that we've come up against with our research is that, no one's really, like I mentioned, everyone only is kind of looking at the brain and injury or disease as opposed to health. And so no one actually wants to fund, or there aren't...
Your brain on sugar? That should be...
There's no funding for how do I keep my brain healthy? Like, instead it's like, what medications are helpful, or what, like, there's always like a profit rather than just, hey, can we actually equip people to avoid that? Or like, anyway, so it's just interesting that everything is so focused on that. And it's like, well, what industries are... Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know, like, you hear sometimes people like, oh, that's bro science. And it's like, sometimes just like peer-reviewed science can be almost appear as bro science in a way. Like I make up my own studies all the time. Like, I often say that vegans have smaller brains. That is I peer-reviewed by myself, Are you vegan?
No.
That's good. That'd be a little disrespectful. I do believe that, though. Vegans are so silly. I feel like they need something's going wrong with how silly they are with everything.
Yeah.
My favorite is they like, oh, this is vegan chicken. Well, no, chicken is an animal. So we've already messed up here. This is soy and a bunch of other things and a bunch of shit that you're now like.
Yeah. Just being vegan doesn't mean you're healthy.
Yeah. That's what I love. I don't know. It's so weird, because I hear these things like, man, how do we solve these? And it's like, I'm a very libertarian kind of my beliefs, and I'm like, well, some things I feel like the government should fund, like research studies. But it's like, well, if the government like has their own bias that they're trying to perform for, like, that's not good.
Right. So we actually have we're mainly funded by private philanthropy, which is awesome, of people that just care. And they're like, hey, we want to see, brain health improve for students.
So you'll kind of be the first person to be like, hey, we did a study on your brain on sugar and found that it causes cancer.
Yeah, I mean, we could.
I'm obsessed with sugar, but I talk shit about it all the time. Like, it's like being a drug addict, and like, it's like being addicted to math and telling people to never do math. Or like, it's like, that's how I am. It's like, I tell like, don't, like, I'm like not going to let our kid have sugar. Like, I'm just like, it's so bad. And then I'm like, getting Ginnies at like 3 a.m, just like.
It's addicting.
Yeah.
It actually is.
There is a book called The War Against Sugar. That's another really good one.
I think I've heard of that one.
or something. The Case Against Sugar is what it's called. And it talks about like entire wars have been fought over sugar, like in the early, like before technology.
I could see that.
And then brain scans of people's brains on sugar is very interesting. I saw Doc Amen do that.
Yeah. It's not pretty.
I think we should wrap this up. But one of my favorite things is, I don't know, do you follow him at all?
Yeah, a little bit.
Like he tells that story, I think it's maybe as a TED Talk, like his biggest story he does about his like nephew that started to act like a psychopath. And he like scanned him and found this like cyst that had blocked off like connections happening to like one of his lobes. And then nobody would drain it. So he like made it happen, drained it or whatever, got rid of it. And then the kid was completely normal again. But he was like 12 years old and talking about killing people and suicidal thoughts and just like acting out of nowhere, just acting completely like, you know, kicking somebody to the ground and not feeling bad about it. Like just like real scary stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how many kids are out there that everybody are labeling like, oh, I have a murderer as a kid, that if they just did a brain scan, they might be able to find something that fits it.
Totally. I mean, yeah, I know we're trying to wrap up, but a lot of, if you look at juvenile detention centers, even prisons, like the majority of them have some form of brain injury or communication language disorders. And so it's like, it's not so much that they weren't following the rules, they just probably didn't understand, or they didn't hear you, or they didn't, you know, or like there's something that's preventing them from being able to inhibit that behavior, or, you know. So it's really sad that they're just in jail, and then they're not getting any help they need, and then it's just this vicious cycle where they don't get rehabilitated. But
and that's kind of the issue with like a bad upbringing, which is like if everyone around you is a drug dealer, like you're going to be a drug dealer too. Juvy's an interesting thing. I've never been near one, so I don't know anything about it, but I've had employees that, you know, like, I made a bunch of bad decisions as a kid. I went to juvenile. I was like, wow, that's crazy that we build jails for children. Like that's a real berserk thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend that's doing her PhD, and she's really interested in, like her husband's actually a police officer. And so she's interested in the justice system and brain injury specifically. And so, wanting to get better programs in there for them so that they have a fighting chance when they leave. Yeah.
I mean, isn't like a good decision to be like, hey, your kids, like I know we can't say this in Texas, but like maybe high school football isn't a great idea.
Yeah. It just totally depends like, on the person.
Like some of this stuff I see, and I'm like, maybe this isn't like, I know everything's high risk, but like, I just feel a lot more confident about my kid playing ping pong than I do about him. And I think neighborhood football is great, or flag football is fine. I get that it's not like real football, but it's like, as a parent, like you got to make good parenting decisions. And if we know that brain injuries can change their entire life for the worse, then like we should probably make decisions to stop that.
Totally. I do think there are a lot of positive things about team sports, but there's.
Yeah. I was homeschooled, so I had no friends. So all I know is like solo sports. Like I'm really good at golf.
There you go.
So I'm not a great, but I do see something, again, Jordan Peterson talks about, but it's like the reason it's not about if you win or lose, and it's about how you play, is because the kids that are the most likable have the most friends. And the kids that have the most friends have the most mentors. And the people with the most mentors have the best chance of doing well in life every time. But so if you're the best player, but nobody likes you, then nobody wants to pour into you, and nobody wants to correct you, and you just continue down the wrong path. But if you're liked, people want to like help you do better. Yeah. And so that's why it's like, it's not about how you, like if you win or lose, it's how you play. When I heard that, I was like, now I get it.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.